across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham, and this, of course, is the only place to be. It's the home of common sense. It is, on the face of it, the only place to come to find out what the truth is. What is going on out there? The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We used to say on the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Now on Morning Glory, the truth is even more important because, of course, we are in receipt of yet another resignation from the Labour cabinet. Tulip Siddiq, the woman who was accused of being a little bit too close to her auntie, who was running Bangladesh like some kind of gangster state. It turns out that it might have been not a great look, and even though these calls for her resignation have been coming in since about mid-December last year, finally, she resigned yesterday, saying, I haven't done anything wrong, but I don't want to be a distraction. That old chestnut. She's a best mate of Sir Keir Starmer, of course. Theo Usherwood's here this morning to help us with why it is that every time he comes in, another Labour minister resigns. Because, of course, we've had Louise Hay. She resigned because it turned out she was a convicted fraudster. Can't be Secretary of State for Transport when you're a convicted fraudster. Now Tulip Siddiq appears to be resigning just in case she might become a convicted fraudster later on. We're not suggesting anything of the sort. Of course, that would be wrong. But let's find out about Keir Starmer and what he wanted to do just before he got into power, because he said he was going to make everything better.
Change Britain, we must change ourselves. We need to clean up politics. I will restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism.
A total crackdown on cronyism and cleaning up of the government. Really? Well, it's not going too well, is it? We're going to be talking about that. Plus, an amazing story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph in which it says the Prime Minister is to pay damages to Gerry Adams. That's right. The man who was the head of Sinn Féin, the man who was accused many times of being involved with the IRA, even though he denied it, who spent time in prison during the Troubles, of course. He's apparently now going to be available to sue the government for imprisoning him, which has caused an absolute outrage amongst some of the victims of the IRA, who say, what on earth is going on? Why on earth would this government want to enable people who had been associated with terrorism, at the very least, in the Troubles, actually to get compensation for being locked up? Absolutely extraordinary stuff. We'll be talking about that. Plus, will the Chagos Islands deal be signed off today? We'll get an answer to that one. We've got Kemi Badenoch this morning saying that grooming gangs are made up of peasant immigrants, which will upset plenty of people on the left. We've got an incredible video for you of two guys in a prison brandishing zombie knives. Yesterday we told you how you can now smuggle weapons into prison along with drugs and food, all sorts of stuff going on. And learner drivers apparently are facing a sort of a lottery. Depending on who they get to test them, they can either be passed by 9 out of 10 chances or 1 out of 10 chances. We're going to talk about the state of our roads because the potholes are everywhere, hundreds of millions of pounds worth of damage being done to cars. But does anybody know how to drive anymore? That's my question. It's 5 minutes past 6. This is Morning Glory. Welcome to Morning Glory. Theo Usherwood's here. Very good morning to you, Theo.
Very good morning to you, Mike.
I mean, it's not quite every time you come in that there's a resignation, but it's beginning to look like you may have a touch of the Grim Reaper about you in terms of the government. Let's have a quick look, right, at what Keir Starmer, because there's always a clip, right?
There's
whatever you say,
a clip.
You know, we're going to be better than they were. Let's have a look at Keir Starmer on Dominic Raab being resigning in 2023.
Because there's a double weakness here. He should never have appointed him in the first place, along with other members of the cabinet that shouldn't have been appointed. And then he didn't sack him. And even today, it's Raab who resigns rather than the Prime Minister who acts. No matter how many times you change the person at the top, you've essentially got a party that just can't deliver, just can't govern. Well, the big question for the Prime Minister is why he was so weak to appoint him in the first place. The second question for the Prime Minister is why he didn't sack him. And now it's left to Dominic Raab to resign, and the Prime Minister hasn't acted. And it's that indecision, it's that weakness, I think, that goes to the heart, not just of this Prime Minister, but of 13 years now of failure.
Yeah, weakness, indecision, not sacking. I mean, Tulip Siddiq has been at the centre of this kind of storm, shall we call it, since at least mid-December. And there were calls for her to resign before Christmas.
Yes, and she clung on She initially referred herself and had a conversation with the propriety and ethics team, who said that they accepted her explanations for her involvement in a deal where the new Bangladeshi government were accusing the old deposed regime, of which her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, was the Prime Minister and head of embezzling £4 billion out of a £10 billion.
And also specifically
deal.
Using the money to buy properties in London, which, of course, it would appear that Tulip Siddiq was the recipient of some benefit.
Yes, and what's interesting, of course, or the key part to this, I should say, is Sir Laurie Magnus, when he investigated...
He's the ethics guy,
He's the ethics guy, so he's the independent advisor on ethics within the government. When he went to look at the paper trail, he couldn't find any conclusive proof that all financial and tax regulations had been followed. She was asked about this. This shouldn't come as a surprise, because she was asked about one of the properties, the property in King's Cross, in 2022. Where did the money come from? And she insisted it was a gift from her parents. Of course, when she had to come to sign the ministerial register about the properties, it's a very different story.
Also, she made that rather bizarre statement, didn't she, in which she admitted that she'd now come to a different understanding of how she'd acquired a property.
Yes.
And everyone's going, sorry, you acquired a property because somebody gave it to you. Isn't that the case? Rather than you found a different method. But, I mean, and Harry Cole from The Sun tweeted this out yesterday, that as you say, the ministerial code may not have been broken. However, this is what was actually said by the ethics chief. Given the nature of Ms Siddiq's ministerial responsibilities, which include the promotion of the UK financial services sector and the inherent probity of its regulatory framework as a core component of the UK economy and its growth, it is regrettable that she was not more alert to the potential reputational risks, both to her and the government, arising from her close family's association with Bangladesh. And then he says, I would not advise that this shortcoming should be taken as a breach of the ministerial code, but you will want to consider her ongoing responsibilities in the light of this. And as Harry Cole said, that's not exactly clearing her, is it?
No, and she needed to be completely exonerated by Sir Laurie Magnus. That was the only way she was going to get off the hook. And the problem, of course, for Keir Starmer is this is the second resignation in 2 months. And he promised something so very different. Even the Institute for Government, this is a great quote, because the point is that he said he was going to do things better. He was first out of the blocks. Keir Starmer was first out of the blocks when the Tories made a mess of things, right?
Of course.
When there was
as we saw there.
Yeah. So the Institute for Government... Now, the Institute for Government is straight down the line. It's not a partisan organisation. It doesn't just dole out criticism of Labour or the left. It says, having been so quick to loudly criticise the last government for its perceived failings on ethics and integrity, Starmer and his team need to show that they truly understand the importance of meeting the standards that they promised to uphold once in office.
But that's the problem, and that's why commentators like yourself and John Renton has said it, and Dan Hodges, who's coming on later, has also said it. You know, you don't go around making promises that you're going to clean up government, because all that's going to happen is whenever something goes wrong, people like us are going to play the clip of when you said you were going to clean up government.
But they didn't.
It's a real playground error.
But they didn't have much else to say during the general election. They didn't have a real point of differentiation between themselves and the Conservative Party. So their whole sell was, we can be competent. This is from Keir Starmer. We can be competent. We can manage government. We can run government to a much higher standard. And the public, say what you will, they decided to trust Labour. And then once in office, do they do it? Do they fail? Of course they
And Keir
fall
Starmer's
down.
problem as well is that he clearly can't see the wood for the trees, because he's made it very clear as well, he's made a point of it in his letter to her, the door is always open. Well, what if the Bangladeshi authorities decide to charge her? Because they're investigating her, and they're considering charging her, I believe, with some kind of misuse of power, along with all of the itinerant kind of, embezzlement charges that her auntie is facing. And then he's going to look like with egg on his face again.
Yes, it was a very
supposed to be a lawyer.
It was a very stupid line to put in. What should have happened is that when this came out, the easiest thing, the sensible thing to do, because when you're dealing with something like, overseas, you're dealing with the new Bangladeshi government, there are always going to be new allegations coming out. It was obvious that was going to happen, story after story after story. And what they should have done is she should have just resigned, nobody say anything, let the investigation happen. If she's exonerated, then there's a way back. If she's not, then she sits on the back benches for the rest of her political career. It's over. But rather than just actually let events take their course, Keir Starmer seems to have been blinded by a personal friendship with Tulip Siddiq. Of course, they're neighbouring constituents. They have neighbouring constituencies. She's Hampstead and Highgate, he's Holborn and St Pancras.
Yeah.
And that seems to have got it, and you could tell from the tone of the letter, compare and contrast with the 4-line letter that he sent to Louise Haigh, the Transport Secretary, when she resigned, and it seems to have got in the way of his judgment. She should have gone much sooner, and as a result, there's a ripple impact.
Well, at the very least, even if you only go back a couple of days, you know, the Sunday Times revelations on Sunday, which included the rather interesting fact that her campaign leaflets were found inside the, you know, the sort of the home of the Bangladeshi leader in Dhaka, the palace, and here was their sort of, you know, leaflets that she'd been putting out in Swiss Cottage. You know, you kind of go, well, how did that get there? On Sunday, it should have been the day that she went, even if she'd waited all that time and all those weeks since December, and instead we had to go till Tuesday. When it looks like, you know, things are not looking too good.
But they pinned it all on this. They pinned it all on this inquiry, and the problem with it by Sir Laurie Magnus. But the problem with this, Mike, is that rather than just resign quickly, limit the damage, as to be fair, they did pretty quickly with Louise Haigh. I mean, I was sitting in this seat at sort of 6:15 in the morning.
Do you remember? Yeah, well, I was calling for her to resign. I think at 6:15, and by 7:20, she was gone.
Yes, finished, over. And rather than do that and get ahead of the story, they allowed the drip. I think we're up to sort of 7 or 8 stories, 3 properties, leaflets, and as you say, in a palace. Then we had the head of the new Bangladeshi government calling, you know, raising serious concerns about what had gone on whilst she, you know, by Sheikh Hasina, of course, the aunt of Tulip Siddiq. Plus, you know, the list went. There was a litany, and rather than just go quickly and save the blushes, Keir Starmer has stood by her and pinned everything on this inquiry.
And I think is this not a flaw in his political character? I'm not going to say a flaw in his personal character, but in his political character, he seems to stand by the wrong people for too long, and eventually has to let them go. I mean, look at his relationship with Jeremy Corbyn.
It was obvious she was going to have to go. You know, I was doing some commentary on Saturday night, and as soon as that story broke, it was like you don't follow that story up by going, you know, the response isn't, oh, we'll point you to, and this is what Number 10 did, by the way, we'll point you to a statement 8 days ago that was given by the Prime Minister's spokesman. At that point, you send in the letter and you say, thanks for your resignation, I appreciate it, Tulip Siddiq, bye-bye. Right. That's the way you deal with it, but they've just let it go on and on and on.
He will be accused, as he accused the Tories of dithering. He'll be accused of not making a decision and trying to sneak out of it through the back door by making her resign instead of sacking her. Yeah. So he hasn't sacked her.
And no, this is definitely a resignation. Yeah. Make no mistake about it. And Louise Haigh was a sacking, as it turned out to be. I mean, she resigned, but she was going to be sacked otherwise. But we've got PMQs today. Kemi Badenoch needs to land this one. She does. She really needs to. She needs to make this one count at PMQs. And I'm sure her team will be working furiously to make sure that she has the right 6 questions about what he knew and when. Right. You know, to pin it on the PM, because there is, you know, serious, as you say, serious questions about his judgment. Right,
and that's when the Prime Minister's questions and the questions themselves are so important, isn't it? Because the questions have to be really like laser focused. I hate that as a phrase, but you know, she has to ask the right question. It's not good enough to go, you know, can you please explain to us why Tulip Siddiq had to resign? You know, she needs to find something to go right in on him to find that he hasn't got anywhere to go.
Yes, and of course, because it's in the House of Commons, he has to be honest. He can't lie in the House of Commons, because if he lies in the House of Commons...
Although he had to apologise, and not much has been made of this, but over Christmas it was all very hush-hush, but he had to apologise to the House, if you remember, for saying that both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak had criminal convictions because they've been given fixed penalty notices, and that was wrong and a lie, and he knew it was a lie, and he's a lawyer, so he can't pretend he didn't know it was a lie, and he's now had to apologise.
And you have to come back and correct the record. So if you tell something that is false...
Just want to point that out, Keir Starmer, in case you think you got away with it. Oh, sorry.
But yeah, he'll have to come back. So Kemi Badenoch, I'm sure, is aware of that, and it's about his judgment, what he knew, when he knew it, why he didn't act.
I wonder if he's been to any of these houses that she was gifted by the grifters of Bangladesh.
Yes,
because he's been to Bangladesh, and we had a story yesterday saying that he had entertained the auntie in the House of Commons, I think, as recently as last month.
Right.
That was the story that Guido Fawkes put out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's still plenty of stuff to look into over this story.
And I'm sure the Tories won't let it go, but the main story has, you know, by doing it, on Tuesday ahead of, PMQs today, Keir Starmer will be hoping that the main sting of the story has been taken away. But I think there are real questions about his judgment, and I think many of your listeners will be, disappointed at best, furious at worst, that actually this was a man who promised something so very different. This was the man who stood on the
government of service, wasn't it?
Public service.
Government of service. Even Dan Hodges writing in the Mail today, what a load of old cobblers is the headline. Government of service, my backside, I think you would say.
Yeah, and it's loyalty, it's personal friendship that's got in the way.
What do you mean? Cronyism is what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cronyism. He was going to bring an end to that, wasn't he?
Yeah, cronyism, friendship, patronage.
Yeah.
You can use the words as you will.
Sleaze.
Sleaze.
Yeah. I mean, I would say so. If he's had tea in one of these houses that was nicked from the people of Bangladesh, I think he should resign, quite frankly. David says this, morning, Mike, if Theo Usherwood's appearance on your show does cause a cabinet minister to quit, please could you have him on every day until they're all gone?
Thank you for that.
Well, why not? Let's get a voice note from Matt. Possibly so? Oh, we'll come back to Matt. Let's have a little break. We'll come back.
400 MPs, and it's littered with controversy and sleaze, with their snouts in the trough and their blinkers falling off, whilst our great nation collapses to its knees. We've got 4 more painful years until we get a chance to vote, as they appoint another bunch of useless peers. And our government keeps spending millions of billions, tying us down in debt for the next 100 years.
Very good. Very good indeed, Matt. For this time of the morning, 19 minutes past 6, I take my hat off to you. Very well. We'll have to play that out again, give it a proper listen from the beginning. This is, of course, Morning Glory. We are the home of common sense. And it's the year of common sense because coming up, we're going to be telling you about a U-turn that the government has made. And I think it may be the beginning of something big. This is Talk.
Changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. What a beautiful name. The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, Canada and the United States, that would really be something. All hell will break out in the Middle East, and it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 22 minutes past 6. There, Usherwood is here with us, right here through the morning till 10 o'clock. Louise Hagan, Tulip Siddiq gone already. Who's next, says Tony? Well, you might have to wonder if Rachel Reeves is looking over her shoulder a little bit, because Rachel Reeves has got a bit of a breather, I suppose, this morning because of Tulip Siddiq's resignation, but it won't be for long. We'll play a couple of clips from that in a moment. Let's get a new voice note.
Morning, Mike. I'm old enough to remember the days when senior Labour politicians were dockers, post office workers, miners, and lived in modest houses, with some exceptions, of course. Now it seems like the Labour Party are more like the Conservative Party. They have massive property portfolios, acquired goodness knows how, in expensive parts of London and all over the place. And they're never quite sure whether they own the things or not. They've got form for this, haven't they? But one good thing that's come out of recent events, at least we've got an idea where some of the foreign aid's gone.
Absolutely right, yeah, that's the thing. It is interesting how the Labour Labour backbenchers and front benches have changed over the years. You know, when you think back to the people who came in through trade union movements, people who came in from Ruskin College, you know, that kind of thing, working class hero types. There's not very many of them around now.
It's a really fascinating thing. I found myself at on Sunday. I was asked to speak at a sort of policy forum for the Jewish Labour movement,
right?
And the Jewish Labour movement has often actually a sort of focal point for sort of modernisers within the Labour Party. And there was one of the trade union leaders, and it was a semi sort of private event, so I won't name it. It was a very senior trade union leader who was railing against the middle class project that is this Labour Party, that he was, and particularly around net zero, funnily enough, was that, you know, he was talking about jobs in the northeast of England which had gone with, you know, whether it be coal mining initially, you know, during the 1970s, and of course now, you know, he was talking about wind farms and the fact that actually all these wind farms are being manufactured overseas and brought in, and the loss, you know, the fact that Ed Miliband, he was very forthright in his views, that politicians didn't get the devastation of net zero on working class, traditional working class Labour communities. Because
for Ed Miliband, the project is the main thing. It doesn't matter. I mean, we were hearing about him yesterday, and national security worries from Dearlove, the former head of MI6, saying that, you know, if you bring all these Chinese-made wind farms and all this Chinese-made technology into Britain, you know, it means that we're then reliant, and they have access possibly to our energy networks, right? But apparently Miliband doesn't care about national security. He just wants there to be net zero, and he doesn't care about people's jobs. He doesn't care about how it looks. He just wants net zero. It's like a fanaticism.
But these communities, these working class communities, which were traditionally represented by the trade unions, Labour has got nothing to say to them. There's nothing within that actually speaks to them and makes their communities better off, and that's problematic.
It is, because even now they're still saying it. I mean, Rachel Reeves, we're going to get onto in a minute, she was up in Parliament yesterday talking about stability and, you know, making people better off, and they keep saying it, but nobody's feeling it, you know. And in fact, we've got an Ed Miliband video. This went out yesterday.
It's 6 months since this government came to office. Now, I want to tell you everything my department has done in the last few months. No, Ed, nobody wants to hear you read our long list. Okay, you can read about it yourself, but I do want to tell you why we have done these things. 6 months ago, we came to office to fight for working people because the country didn't work for you. Energy bills rocketed because of the decisions of dictators and petrostates who control fossil fuel markets. That's why this government is going all out for clean, homegrown power, for energy independence, to bring down bills for good, create well-paid industrial jobs, and protect our children and grandchildren from the threat of climate disaster. So the list of what we've done does matter, but it's all in service of something bigger, changing the country and making it work for you.
So the prices aren't coming down. It's all nonsense.
And the £300 off your energy bills.
That's just another lie.
That isn't being repeated anymore.
No.
And the point is, you know, for the trade unions, for those who want, you know, he promised their industrial jobs, but those jobs are going abroad.
Yes.
So, you know, I found this out again on Sunday. You know, they have a quota on electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And if you don't hit your quota, you have to pay a car manufacturer.
They've watered that down, haven't they?
Like Nissan has to pay a £15,000 fine. Do you know where that £15,000 goes to?
No.
It doesn't go to the Treasury.
No.
It's given to Chinese companies who are meeting the quota.
Yeah.
So if you are amongst others, if you meet your quota, you get the money from the companies that can't meet the quota, and it's companies based in this country, like Ford, like Nissan, who can't meet the quota because the market isn't there, and Vauxhall, who can't hit net zero targets because the government's net zero targets, because people simply don't want to wait 15 hours to charge their car or however long it takes to charge their car, and they just want to go to the petrol pump and fill up, and there isn't the demand for them, and because they can't sell them, they're getting penalised, and that money is then going to their competitors overseas who can manufacture these cars much more cheaply.
Ridiculous. Absolutely unbelievable. Let's talk about a U-turn, though, because we're famously saying quite often that this government seems very intransigent, doesn't like to change its mind, doesn't want to change course, but finally, there is a U-turn in the government. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, is poised to bring back the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act in a watered-down form in the coming weeks. Now, she was originally going to get rid of it altogether because she said that it wasn't necessary, and people were worried that there would be real problems at universities and places of higher learning because people would be frightened to say certain things. But apparently, she's now going to make it possible for academic freedom to continue to exist.
Yes, this was one of the first acts of government. I mean, it was pretty much shelved at the same time that Keir Starmer ditched the Rwanda deportation plan, was to get rid of this legislation, Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act, to water it down effectively. And what it was set up to design to do was to protect academic freedoms on university campuses. Yeah. And we have seen, you know, preeminent academics cancelled. They've had protests in their seminars. They've been shouted down. They've been abused, threatened, because they hold, you know, perfectly legitimate academic views, and rather than protect their right to hold their views, you know, against students with, you know, a single-track mindset, the government decided to water it down. And what's interesting is they obviously, when they did this, they didn't think about the impact of it because they've been surprised by the backlash. I'm not surprised by the backlash.
But there's been a backlash on almost everything they've done. This is the first time they've actually changed their mind. They were offered the chance by some of the pensioners' charities and old age charities to water down the pensioners' winter fuel allowance because they could have introduced it next year instead of this year or last year. They could have not introduced the VAT on private schools in January. They could have done it in September, you know, but they haven't watered down anything else. But this one has done. And again, it's not exactly a core issue for the bulk of the people of this country, is it?
No.
I mean, people care about their energy prices, they care about the price of goods in the shops, they care about the NHS, they care about migrants, they care about all sorts of things. They don't really care about this.
No, I think you're quite right to say they don't care about it, but I think it's quite... I think the problem with the other ones you mentioned, Mike, is that there is obviously a cost implication, so they have to find the money from elsewhere. Yeah. And we're going to talk, you know, Rachel Reeves has got her budget, you know, she's got a budget plan for the autumn. She's probably going to, she may well, and there was a story on page 17 of the Telegraph today where, you know, she was asked by Nick Timothy, the former Chief of Staff to Theresa May, who's now an MP in the House of Commons, you know, would you rule out an emergency budget in the spring? Unable to do so. She can't do it.
No.
So she may need to come back and, you know, she's going to have to find money from somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, she says she's going to find it from savings in Whitehall. Well, good luck with that. Yeah. Let's just take a slight break from politics for a moment and show you the front page of The Sun because it's a relief to be in remission. Big picture of Princess of Wales, Kate, who's telling of her relief at being given the news and she's looking forward to a fulfilling year ahead. That's on the front pages of quite a lot of the papers. But The Sun, I think, do it best. No sign of cancer. Apparently, the hospital, she says, has been exceptional, and she was visiting others at the same hospital where she was treated for chemotherapy earlier in the year last year. So some good news for a change from the royal family, which is rather nice. Coming up, we're going to find out what Rachel Reeves said to Richard Tice when he was asking her about the economy. Plus, we're going to talk about drivers and potholes and all that sort of thing. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:35. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Vicky in Bournemouth says, great show. Morning, Mike. Lammy giving away the Chagos Islands would enable China to invade Taiwan. America have been preventing China doing this with the base there. Lammy is starting a war between America and China. Starmer and Lammy must both be aware of this. So the question is, Mike, why would they be doing it? Well, I think the answer is, Vicky, that they're completely and utterly incompetent. I don't think they really know what they're doing in any arena whatsoever, whether it be home or abroad. But let's take a break from politics for a moment, because we're going to go across live to our favourite royal commentator in Los Angeles, California. Kinsey Schofield is with us. Kinsey, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike. I was so thrilled to hear the positive news about the Princess of Wales.
Yeah. Isn't it wonderful? And it's a great front page on The Sun this morning. No sign of Kate's cancer. She's comforting patients in the same hospital where she had her chemotherapy. It's a relief to be in remission. I think it's the news that an awful lot of people have been hoping to hear.
That's right. She visited yesterday the Royal Marsden Hospital in West London, and it was so sweet to watch her walk around and personally thank staff, some staff that actually cared for her, and she thanked them for their care and compassion. One patient that was there, she said, "I'm sorry, I wish there was more that I could do to help you," which, you know, that breaks your heart when you hear that. She also told another one, you know, you are in the best of hands, which I imagine as a patient does give you some confidence when you look at how happy and healthy she looks today compared to where we now know she was a year ago. It was a mystery at the time, but we now know what she was going through a year ago.
Yeah, and I mean, you forget really how young she is to be suffering from such a terrible thing, and you would hope that that being in remission obviously is a fantastic thing. The chemotherapy obviously worked, but you know, it'll change their lives forever, really, won't it?
I think so. I mean, a lot of us grew up watching Prince William, you know, navigate life without his mother. And I think that that was one of the reasons we were so heavily invested and worried about Catherine's health over the last year, because we never wanted anything similar to hurt him in that way. And we didn't want him to have to be worried about his children not having their mother. So this is incredible news. I thought that the family handled it with with such grace over the last year. And you're right. It's not just the fact that she's young. It's the fact that she's got 3 adorable children that you can tell are absolutely in love with her.
Yeah, absolutely right. Now, I can see from where you are there in Hollywood, the Hollywood sign behind you, there's been some terrible times there in Los Angeles. I'm hoping that you haven't been affected at all, Kinsey. But fears in the Sun again this morning that the Oscars ceremony will be cancelled altogether. There was talk that it might be delayed, talk that it might be put back a little while, but they're now saying so many of the stars have been hit by the blaze and the ongoing fires that are still reaching around the area that the Oscars might be cancelled altogether.
I mean, it does seem silly. I feel like the only way they could do something like that is if it was aligned with some type of fundraiser or something. But, I don't, it feels silly to watch people in $6,000 dresses when you know that they don't have a home to go home to. I do believe that it's not the best look right now.
No, exactly right. And how has it been for you there, and what's it like at the moment?
Right now, it's much better. Last week, my home was filled with smoke. Everywhere. It smelled like a bonfire. We spent the weekend putting clothes together, dog food, dog treats, all sorts of goodies to send up north. It's been really hard, and it's not just the celebrities that have been affected. There are a lot of people that lived up there for 70 years. That's all they've ever known, and their insurance was yanked from them months ago. Right. This couple, they're 90 years old. Their daughter stayed behind to spray the house down with a hose. It's been absolutely frightening, and the insurance companies are abandoning you. You feel like the government has let you down. Gavin Newsom cutting $100 million last year in the budget to fight these wildfires. Karen Bass. I mean, it's just been a nightmare.
And there's been some talk now that there's lawsuits coming against an electric company because electric company equipment may have failed and sparked one of those deadly fires.
Lawsuits are on the horizon. There's one particular celebrity that's been very vocal about this on social media, and that's Spencer Pratt, who lost his home in the Palisades. He's married to Heidi Montag, and they are trying to rally more together. They want to file a lawsuit not only on potentially the electric company, but they feel like the state mismanaged it. He said it was hours after he made the initial 911 call before somebody came to check on the fire that he was trying to alert them to. So, a lot of people, a lot of missteps, and hopefully lessons learned. But look at the loss. It's horrible.
It really is just disgusting. It's disgraceful. But listen, Kinsey, glad to see that you're okay and glad to see that your home is okay as well. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Kinsey Schofield there, royal commentator, live in Los Angeles for us. It is extraordinary what's been going on over there, and the politics of it as well is starting to kick in, isn't it? Yes,
I mean, it was apocalyptic scenes, and there was just there's a very good piece in The Sun about whether the Oscars can now go ahead. Right. And the look, as Kinsey was saying there, of people waltzing down the red carpet in $6,000 dresses and tuxedos as the city, Los Angeles, tries to get back on its feet. And even if the Sun quotes are sort of saying, even if the fires stop tomorrow, Los Angeles is still going to be hurting. I mean, the absolute devastation of what has happened. Of course, we've got the Olympics in 3 years' time.
Yeah,
I was asked about this yesterday. I think, no country like America has the ability to rejuvenate and to get back on its feet. Yeah. We saw what happened after 9/11.
They've got some World Cup action, I think, going on as well, haven't they?
Yeah, and we've got the Olympics in 2028. I think it will be able to come back, but this just feels too soon.
Yeah,
with the Oscars, especially when it's all about the glitz and the pomp. And the razzmatazz of showbiz,
and it doesn't
just
matter,
going up against the fact, tens of thousands of residents in LA have lost their homes, their livelihoods, everything has been destroyed. And they've got no guarantees, of course, of getting anything out of the insurance companies.
Well, they won't get anything from the insurance companies. They'll get money from the government because the government will give you, a low interest loan to rebuild your house. But you can't rebuild, 10,000 houses just like that, or 20,000 houses just like that. It's going to take ages.
And people are going to obviously question whether whether they can rebuild their homes where they were destroyed by the fire, whether that is wise or whether actually they have to look to move elsewhere to whether it's further north, out of the path of possible future wildfires, which will probably inevitably happen.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's have a look at Rachel Reeves again, because we've got lots of messages coming in about the Rachel from Accounts woman. And this is Richard Tice yesterday from Reform, putting some questions to the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Well, the data shows, Chancellor, in September and October that the economy is falling. It's going down. And the markets are expressing their clear concerns, the currency markets, the bond markets, in selling off, that actually there is no growth and that the economy continues to fall. If the Chancellor is so confident, can she confirm to the House when the economy will start growing again?
Chancellor. I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. Growth is the #1 mission of this Labour government. But the truth is, it's not possible to turn things around quickly after 14 years of lacklustre growth and declining living standards from the party opposite. But we're leaving no stone unturned, which is why last week in China we secured £600 million worth of tangible benefits for the UK economy, helping great British businesses exporting overseas.
Yes, once again, the £600 million, 60 times less than Indonesia got, 30 times less than Peru got. So it's hardly anything worth writing home about, is it?
And it's 1% of the increase in the interest we will pay on the national debt, gone up by £10 billion or 12 billion pounds,
and rising.
And of course, this is over 600 million spread over 5 years. What's 120 million pounds a year? It is not very
nothing.
much.
It's absolutely nothing. You wouldn't last in the NHS, I think, more than a couple of hours. No. I mean, that's the problem. Alan from Middlesbrough makes a good point. He says, morning, Mike. In 6 months, we've had Starmer effectively removing Sue Gray, Louise Haigh and Tulip Siddiq from their senior positions. 3 women. Doesn't look good for Rachel from Accounts. And again, you know, do you remember his excitement about how he was appointing a woman to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, and his greatest advisor, Sue Gray, a woman, and look how modern we are, even though we haven't managed to find a woman leader for the Labour Party. And look at my good friend Tulip Siddiq, a woman who's a fantastic operator and knows everything there is to know about corruption. Well, we didn't realise from the inside. You know, he likes appointing women. He also likes getting rid of them.
Yeah, Rosie Duffield made this point that she thought that Keir Starmer had a women problem.
She has said that, hasn't she?
She has said that on the record.
Yeah.
And of course, she's been, you know, she was not protected by the Labour hierarchy under Keir Starmer when she spoke out about trans. You know, those were gender critical views.
Gender Recognition Act.
Being targeted by the trans lobby. I mean, this is not a new.
And they talk about it a lot, don't they, misogyny, but there's nobody more misogynistic than a left-wing, socialist. They really don't like women at all. Very interesting, that. Lisa from Cleveley says, can you ask Theo if Tulip Siddiq is still an MP on the back benches as she only resigned from her ministerial post? Well, yes, that's true. She will still continue to take the money until such time as there's a reason for her to be, say, either recalled to have a by-election or to be fired. You can't be fired, really, from an MP's job, can you?
No, unless she's got, unless she's, and there's no suggestion at the moment that she's done anything wrong that would warrant this, but she couldn't be fired from, unless she had a criminal conviction. She went to prison for, I think it's longer than 3 months. So
you're all right in the House of Lords with that, though. you don't get fired from the House of Lords over a criminal conviction.
But she could face, as a lady, you know, if there is, she could be censured by the House of Commons authorities and by the independent advisor. There could be a further investigation, and then she could face a recall petition, and that would open up the seat to a by-election. Hampstead and Highgate is a fairly safe Labour seat, but you might get an independent creeping in there.
Yeah, you might.
Say, particularly a left-wing independent who might come in and give Labour a run for their money in a seat like Hampstead and Highgate.
Yeah, very possibly so. The Champagne Socialists, of course, up there. Let's get a voice note from Nick.
Morning, Mike. It's Nick Moore. Ed Miliband is a hardline socialist brought up in a Marxist family, and as such, he's prepared to burn the house down to impose his twisted ideology on a nation. He doesn't care about the people. He certainly doesn't care about the working man. It's all about ideology at the expense of anything. He doesn't care. Best wishes, Mike.
Absolutely right, Nick. Completely correct. He doesn't care. He's not interested in the people. He's not interested in the complaints. He's not interested in anything other than hitting net zero. And if he was sitting here with me and I said to him, what do you think we're going to achieve by getting net zero? He wouldn't know. Because as Julie Hartley-Brewer quite often points out, he's got no more qualifications in science than anybody else has. He's not a scientist. He doesn't know anything. He works on models. He works on graphs. He works on information that he gets from The Guardian. You know, I'm afraid that doesn't really count. We've got much more to do, including our promised suggested conversation about drivers, learner drivers in particular, and how many bad drivers there are out there as well, plus the potholes. Oh, and this, Sven-Göran Eriksson apparently died owing the taxman 7 million quid. That's quite an achievement. This is Talk.
This poll shows also how toxic, just how unbelievably toxic the Conservative brand is, more toxic, interestingly, than Reform. Can I just say, by the way, one of the things I found most fascinating by this poll, and there's so much more I want to talk about, so let's not spend too long on this, but the most fascinating thing is that when people are asked, you know, whether the first 6 months of Keir Starmer's premiership, you know, whether it had been good or not, whether it had been successful or not, 60% said unsuccessful.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:51. Theo Usherwood is here with us. We're looking at all the big stories in the papers this morning. Mark and Selby says, Mike, am I alone in thinking that the ministerial code is as slippery as a bag full of greased eels and is more than likely written by ministers? A new code written by AI, perhaps, or better still, the electorate is what is required. And one from Stephen in Middlesbrough who says, morning, Mike, Lord help us, Millipede sounds like he's talking to a load of 4-year-olds. They really think we're all as thick as they should think they are. Well, exactly right. Let's talk about a couple of other stories, though, away from the world of politics. Theo, driving test lottery in the Telegraph. It says, depending on where you have your test, you can either pass like 9 out of 10 people do, or you can fail like 9 out of 10 people do. There's quite a disparity in geography here, isn't there?
Yes, this, of course, runs against assurances that from the Department for Transport that standards when it comes to driving tests are applied consistently across the country. So Ashfield in Nottinghamshire, I know it's a lovely place actually,
right.
That's home to the examiner with the highest pass rate in the country in 2023. They passed 91.7% of all candidates. But pity, if you're living in Scunthorpe and you can't pass your driving test, you now know why, because one examiner granted licences to just 6.3% of candidates. So it's worth reading this story in the Telegraph, and if you live in somewhere like Basildon or in Hartlepool or in Scunthorpe, then what you need to do is just find a parent or somebody who can support you to drive to Newport in Gwent is somewhere good, and you can. There's got a 93.3% pass rate of candidates there, or indeed in Ashfield in Nottinghamshire.
And you can book, can't you? You can book a test in any number of different places. You don't have to book it, because I know from people who had said since COVID it's become quite difficult to even schedule a test because of the fact that there's such a backlog of people who want to try and get a driving lesson.
You raise a serious point here. You know, we talked about Rachel Reeves and economic growth. Driving tests are one of the best ways to get people into work. If you can get your licence, you've then got your car, you've then got an independence.
And in so many parts of the country, without a car, you can't really do anything.
No, you can't do anything. And for instance, my wife sent me to the gym a few months ago to get a personal trainer and get more in shape. And there's a young lad there called Alfie, and he trains me, 22 years old. I said, the best thing you can do, Alfie, is get your driving licence, get a van, get some gear in the car, and drive around and train people at their homes. Because lots of people just don't want to. If you get home, you want to do some training. If you get your driving licence, and that way, all the money that you make rather than the gym taking off a slice of it, all the money you make goes into your pocket, and then of course you've got to pay tax on it or whatever. But it's your money, and it's the best way for. It's a really great way to make It is
a good point, and also out of necessity for an awful lot of people, they can't go and work in a place which is too far away from them, because there's no way to get there by public transport because it's so awful. Let me ask you the question, how long did it take you to get your driving licence?
I passed on my 6th attempt.
Sixth attempt.
Wow. And now I know why, because I had one of those scrupulous driving instructors. I was hopeless at it. But I tell you what, I could not function without my car.
I couldn't. I've got a feeling that the test has become slightly easier though now as well. Although you now have to do a theoretical test, which I didn't have to do.
I had to do the theoretical.
But I drove for 10 years in America because I learned to drive in America, and I had an American licence. Came back to Britain and took a test at the age of 32 and failed it the first time I took it, because obviously I'd got some bad habits or something. But I just get a feeling the way people drive now. You know, how many times have you driven up to a roundabout now, for example, and nobody knows what to do, and you've got people sitting there and you're going, look, it's your right of way, mate, you're to my right, you should go, and then they just sit there.
And it's also
people don't know what they're doing.
People don't know what they're doing. They rely too much on the driving apps. The other thing is, it's very difficult. I mean, when my wife passed her test, and I said, well, we must get a geared car. You have to be able to get a geared car, because then we can go and.
I've got my son one who's learning to drive now.
It's very difficult to drive with a geared car now, especially a petrol car or even a diesel car, even worse, and stay within this 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Next car I will buy an automatic car, because it's almost impossible just to stay within. You know, these cars aren't designed to go at 20 miles an hour. They're just. It's really.
No, I mean it is. No, they're really not, and that's a big problem for a lot of people in London, because even if your concentration sort of wanders for a second, you can go past a camera at 23, 24 and get a ticket. I'm speaking to a guy who was driving me into work the other day who got a ticket for going in one of those those lanes that have been X'd out on the motorway, and he said it's 4 o'clock in the morning. He said he wasn't really paying that much attention. He noticed it was a red X and he moved across, but he got captured on camera, and now he's got a speeding fine for being in the wrong lane at 4 in the morning when there wasn't anybody else on the road.
We know this is money-making.
It is. Absolutely right. One in the Sun for those students of British history and I suppose what you might call historical niceties. The tea break, which which the empire was probably built on, right, is apparently disappearing from the workplace because people say they've got more work to do than ever, increasing workload, changes in workplace culture, i.e. people don't want to sit down and have a cup of tea with each other, and also the rise rise in hybrid working.
Yes, and also I'd also imagine people probably on their phones quite a lot.
Yeah.
You know, they go into the canteen and rather than just sit down and have a chat and chew over the cud, and have a cup of tea. And there was an interesting story I saw out a couple of days ago where in one college in Nottingham they're having to give students lessons in how to speak to people on the phone.
Wow.
Because they just don't know.
They don't like doing it, do they?
They don't like doing it. They get nervous, they get anxious. Phone anxiety, I think, is a phenomenon.
Yeah.
And having conversations face-to-face like we are doing now, which we think is perfectly normal.
Yes.
They don't like it.
They don't like it.
They just would rather do messages. It's funny, I sort of, when I speak...
That's so weird, isn't it?
When I speak to, when I'm in touch with producers or young people in the workplace now, it's quite difficult to get them to pick up the phone.
Yes.
You can't just ring them up.
No.
They'll usually cancel it. You have to send them a WhatsApp first.
Right.
And
are
make
you
sure
available for a conversation? Well, like you're phoning the Queen or something, you know. Would you be willing to take a phone call?
Just a 22-year-old.
I mean, for heaven's sake. Yeah, I mean, you probably get complaints about that. Back on the subject of cars, the cost of repairing vehicle damaged by potholes on UK roads is a record £579 million last year.
Yeah.
And we're also being told as well that actually councils are not paying compensation when they're supposed to. Authorities in charge of roads received almost 66,000 claims from motorists in the 3 years to March 2024, but have only paid out on about 10,000 of them.
Now, I'm going to contradict myself with something I said where I said I hated those apps where, you know, people all follow them when they're learning to drive.
Yeah.
I would say that a couple of the apps, I use Waze, there are others on the market that you can get. They are quite good.
Waze is pretty good, actually.
Waze is pretty good because you get people putting in the information where the pothole is, and you get a flash up to say there is a pothole coming up. So that's what I use to avoid potholes. But yeah,
although if you drive in certain places, you literally get that every single second because there's that many potholes. I mean, all I worry about now is the really deep ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sort of used to seeing quite a lot of potholes, but there's a couple which are really, really deep.
And people say, well, you shouldn't drive an SUV or a Land Rover Defender in central London. Well, going to the potholes, absolutely, you need to be driving.
Absolutely right. And you know, also, people who tell you what kind of car you should be driving, no, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, it's a free world so far, even though Keir Starmer's still trying to limit all of our freedoms.
When you hit one of these things, it completely messes up your car because you end up with a puncture.
Yeah.
That's 250 quid now. If you want a bloke to come out and fix the side of the road, you then mess up the tracking in the wheels.
Yeah.
That's another 300 or 400 quid.
Yeah.
It gets really expensive really quickly.
It does, absolutely right. Theo, good to see you. Hopefully next time we see you, there might be another government minister falling by the wayside. Theo Rushwood there. We've got loads more to come. Dan Hodges coming up. We're going to be talking some more about two-tier free gear Kia. Who's the next minister to go from this government? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. It is Wednesday. It's Prime Minister's Questions Day. And my goodness me, have we got a lot of questions for the Prime Minister. He appears to have lost another cabinet minister. That's the third woman he's lost from his government since he got in, only just over 6 months ago. First it was Sue Gray, the woman who was going to lead the Labour government into the absolute paradise of clean thinking, clean air, clean dealings, and absolutely brilliant government. Unfortunately, she didn't last the first 100 days, even though she was meant to be planning them. She left on day 93 amidst all sorts of scandals about Lord Ali's clothes and money being given to her son and all kinds of other stuff that was going on. She got booted out unceremonially and now sits in the House of Lords, of course. Then we lost Louise Hay. She was, it turns out, the Secretary of State for Transport, but she had a conviction for fraud, which apparently the Prime Minister didn't know about, or at least if he did know about, he didn't think it was very serious. Yesterday, Tulip Siddiq, one of his best friends in politics, was forced to resign because she didn't do anything wrong. That's according to her, although, of course, the people who run the ethics department of the government would differ. They said that because of her responsibilities for the City of London and financial impropriety as the anti-corruption minister, it didn't look great to see that she was being probed by the Bangladeshi corruption investigators over the role that she may or may not have had with her auntie's corrupt government. She may or may not have been in receipt of a couple of houses which were bought with money obtained corruptly by her auntie, houses that were built and bought in London, and she made use of them. It's all very murky. And of course, Keir Starmer wasn't going to be this kind of Prime Minister, was he? This is what he said just before he got in.
Change Britain, we must change ourselves. We need to clean up politics. I will restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism.
Well, not exactly a total crackdown on cronyism, maybe just a slight crackdown on cronyism, like so whenever there is cronyism, we'll let people resign. I won't sack anybody because that would be wrong. Meanwhile, a story that we haven't really touched upon in a big enough way yet, but we will do. The Prime Minister is going to pay damages to Gerry Adams. It's all part of the Human Rights Act. It's all part of a hangover from his days as a human rights lawyer. Gerry Adams, who was, of course, imprisoned in Northern Ireland during the Troubles for his part in some of the IRA terrorism activities. He says he wasn't in the IRA. Nobody really believes that, but he was the head of Sinn Féin. Apparently he's now in line for some compensation, and the victims of the IRA are up in arms about it, quite rightly. 0344 499 1000 is the number. The Chagos Islands deal could be signed off today by Mauritius. We'll bring you up to date on that. The Oscars are in jeopardy over the terrible wildfires in California, which now are being put down very possibly to electrical faults rather than climate change. And also, we've got Kemi Badenoch talking about grooming gangs being made up of peasant immigrants from strange and unusual parts of the world. 0344 499 1000. Also, how's your driving? We'll talk about that too. This is Morning Glory. Here's one from Nikki, who's a driving instructor from Shropshire. Important we don't pass unsafe drivers to boost numbers, though. Where I'm based, many tests are abandoned, as most of the immigrants who have driven in their country so think they can drive here can't drive on our roads. Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? You see an awful lot of people who drive here. I've noticed it particularly where you see cars from Romania, you see cars from Poland, you see cars from other Eastern European countries, you see cars from Ukraine, in fact, quite often. People are allowed to drive here without having to take a test at all. I think the rule is that you're allowed to drive in this country for a year without even having to apply for an international licence. But we'll get into that a little bit more because it's a big story that we need to talk about. But first, let's talk to Dan Hodges, commentator at the Mail on Sunday. Dan, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, I'm very, very keen on the headline on your piece today in the Mail, because it looks like something I would have written, where you basically are having a go at the government of service. What a load of cobblers, you say. I couldn't have put it better myself.
Well, I mean, what can you say? Here we are again. And again, this is something you and I have talked about, not just over the last few months since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. It's something we talked about before the election, and I remember coming on this programme, and I remember talking to you, and I remember saying, we're getting all this holier-than-thou stuff from Keir Starmer, we're getting all this government of service stuff from Keir Starmer, we're getting all this attacking the Tories for their sleaze and their corruption. And I remember saying, you know, this is just a massive hostage to fortune, because when he's in government, all of this pious self-righteousness is going to come back and bite him. And so it's proved. And we're here again. It's another day. It's another negative headline and another completely avoidable headline. I mean, this one comes under the heading of "you couldn't make it up."
Right.
This is the man who pledged if he was elected he would clean up politics.
Yeah.
He's just had to offload his anti-corruption minister because she has been caught at the centre of an international corruption scandal.
Right.
And again, yesterday, Keir Starmer tried to brush it off. He tried to sort of wheedle out of it by saying there'd been this investigation by the head of ministerial standards, and he'd basically given a clean bill of health.
And that's not true, is it?
She hadn't broken the ministerial code. There was no financial impropriety on her part, but reluctantly, she had to go anyway.
Yeah.
And if you read the report, the reason she had to go was quite clear, because McManus says very clearly, because of her links, because of Tulip Siddiq's links with members of her family who are part of this political party in Bangladesh that's just been ousted from power in a coup, her role, it was effectively incompatible with her role as anti-corruption minister.
Also, one of the reasons for the investigation into her auntie is that she's alleged to have used money that she obtained corruptly to buy properties in London, of which Tulip Siddiq appears to be a recipient.
Yeah, now, obviously, usual caveat, Tulip Siddiq denies all wrongdoing. But as McManus equally identifies, Tulip Siddiq, he seems to give her the benefit of the doubt in terms of saying it was inadvertently misled people over these properties, and he, he's clear about that. And this is the thing again that I just do not understand. I mean, as I say today in the Daily Mail, I know Tulip Siddiq. I've known her for a number of years. She actually replaced my mother as MP for Hampstead, and I've known her. She's been a good MP. She's dedicated. She's hardworking. In another brief, she would, I think, have been an effective minister. But everybody knew that Tulip Siddiq had these close relationships with her family in Bangladesh. She had, whether or not she had a financial relationship, there was a political relationship there as well. Everybody knew the nature of the politics of Bangladesh. Everybody knew the nature of the political party of which her close family members were active members. This to appoint her as anti-corruption minister was an accident waiting to happen.
Of course it was.
And everybody knew it.
And also, let's not pretend that he was at arm's length from all of this, Keir Starmer, because he had entertained her family, including the leader of Bangladesh, her auntie, in the Houses of Parliament when he was leader of the opposition. According to Guido Fawkes, and I haven't independently nailed this down, he saw her as recently as last month.
Well, I mean, McManus was very clear. He said, he effectively said, you can't keep her in that role.
Mm.
But the question is, what was she appointed to that role in the first place?
Exactly.
And again, we're not talking about something just emerging, years into the government. We're only just past Keir Starmer's 100 days, and it's happened again.
Yeah.
He's lost Sue Gray. We all know the dodginess that surrounded her appointment.
Yeah.
He lost Lou Hay after it emerged she'd admitted to fraud, and now he's lost his anti-corruption minister at the heart of an anti-corruption scandal. And the key thing is this is where I think it matters politically, because this is becoming like the constant narrative. Keir Starmer was elected on a mandate of change and being different from the Tories. We can see, particularly in this area of personal probity, he and his ministers and MPs are no different.
No, of course they're not.
They may not be any worse. They may not be any worse.
No, they may not be any worse, but that's not the point.
They're not any better.
And that's not the point.
And we now need, from Keir Starmer and the Labour Party and the Cabinet, on this issue of public probity, transparency, honesty, integrity, government service, shut up. Just shut up about all that stuff now. Right. You are bang to rights. You know, Keir Starmer runs around saying, oh, it's really terrible. You know, we have to fix politics because the voters think we're all just as bad as each other. The voters think you're all just as bad as each other because you are all just as bad as each other.
That's exactly right.
As I say, you know worse, you know better. You're not devils.
Yeah, you're not the Caped Crusader of, you know, probity. Let's face it. Let's just in case he does shut up about it, which I doubt that he will. Let's remind ourselves of what he said in 2023 about Dominic Raab.
Because there's a double weakness here. He should never have appointed him in the first place, along with other members of the Cabinet that shouldn't have been appointed. And then he didn't sack him. And even today, it's Raab who resigns rather than the Prime Minister who acts. No matter how many times you change the person at the top, you've essentially got a party that just can't deliver, just can't govern. Well, the big question for the Prime Minister is why he was so weak to appoint him in the first place. The second question for the Prime Minister is why he didn't sack him. And now it's left to Dominic Raab to resign, and the Prime Minister hasn't acted. And it's that indecision, it's that weakness, I think, that goes to the heart, not just of this Prime Minister, but of 13 years now of failure.
I mean, it's uncanny. Apart from the 13 years of failure bit, he could have been talking about himself. And that is, of course, before he had the free glasses from old Lord Ali, when he didn't think he needed them.
Well, exactly. I mean, you've just said it. I mean, that. You know, you could just transpose. I mean, we'll have Kemi Badenoch on saying exactly the same thing today, I'm sure. I mean, Kemi Badenoch, she's got her own problems, but she's not going to miss an open goal light.
Surely she'll get this one right, for heaven's sake.
Well, absolutely. Well, let's wait and see.
You never know.
Yeah,
you never know. I said this earlier to Theo Usher, it's all about the question. She has to get the question right, because if she gives him a question that he can slither around and get out of, that won't be good. But, I mean, you point out as well that after she was removed, and again, I said this to Theo, he's got some kind of sort of political flaw in his character, because even with his accepting her resignation, he says, basically, I appreciate that to end ongoing distraction from delivering our agenda to change Britain, you have made a difficult decision and want to be clear that the door remains open for you going forward. Well, that will come back to haunt him as well if she ends up being charged with something in Bangladesh.
But the key thing here is, and it comes back to what I say about this treating the public like they're idiots. He's essentially claiming you have done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have to let you go from my government anyway.
Yeah.
Now everybody knows that is just utterly preposterous. The reality is the allegations against Tulip Siddiq have been running for weeks, if not months, if not in certain instances years now.
Right.
Again, she contests them and refutes them. But the reality is, Keir Starmer did, as we saw the clip there, the Dominic Raab clip, Keir Starmer did not want to act. He finally realised he had to act, cobbled together this thing where Tulip Siddiq referred herself to the Ministerial Standards watchdog. But we all know that was choreographed with Downing Street. The watchdog has been very clear and basically said she should not have been in this she should not have been in this role in the first place, and she certainly shouldn't be in this role going forward. And Keir Starmer, but rather than stand up and say, fair enough, it was an error in judgment on my part, I shouldn't have appointed her, this is not compatible with my pious pledges about a government of service and cleaning up the Westminster swamp, my bad. He tries to style it by.
Yeah.
And the point is this is not going to be the last one.
Of course it won't be.
We're going to be back here in a few months' time. There'll be another minister or another Labour MP. There'll be another scandal. And as I said, you know, Keir Starmer needs to get off this now.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to hear any more from Keir Starmer or any of his ministers about how they're going to change the culture of politics, etc. You know, that
he
ended.
needs to give up on this government of service cobblers as well, as you quite rightly say. Stop saying.
I mean, who speaks like that anyway?
Right.
I mean, who speaks like that anyway? But the point is, all of that ended, as you rightly pointed out. It ended with the glasses. Ended with the flats, ended with the dresses, ended with the football freebies. That it ended with, you know, the free passes.
Which she's still getting, by the way, as we found out last week.
Well, I mean,
you know, it's just ridiculous. But let me ask you about the replacement, because your penultimate paragraph today, Tulip Siddiq has been replaced by Emma Reynolds, who, it would appear within hours, it emerged that she's lobbied intensely against tougher business curbs on China.
Well, this is the bizarre thing. Emma Reynolds is appointed as Tulip Siddiq's replacement. I'm not entirely sure if she's her replacement as anti-corruption minister, although there's no suggestion Emma Reynolds has been involved in any corruption. I'm not sure she's got that title, but she's a Treasury minister.
Yeah.
It then emerges that Emma Reynolds, it's a matter of public record, before she became a minister, was lobbying intensively on behalf of China to improve the trading relationship, to lobby against the imposition of stringent trading rules on China, to basically make a more favourable trading regime for China. Now, when this first emerged, the government, the Downing Street reportedly said she will not have any responsibility for China. There would in effect be, quite literally, a Chinese wall in terms of her dealings with China. She's now been promoted to this relatively senior Treasury role 48 hours after Rachel Reeves came back from China, saying building trading relationships, engaging with China, my department engaging with China is absolutely vital. So I'm not entirely sure how that is supposed to work. How can Emma Reynolds conduct her responsibilities whilst hiving off from those responsibilities engagement with one of the world's our potential most important trading partners? Again, it doesn't make sense. And again, it's indicative that Keir Starmer does not think, is incapable of thinking, you know, a move ahead, never mind 2, 3, 4 moves ahead. And again, it raises questions about his judgment.
It really does. And once again, returning to the pool of talent, he's now brought back into the tent the bloke who came up with the Edstone idea, isn't he? Torsten Bell, who appears to have been now promoted once again. He's the guy that came up with that ridiculous idea that Ed Miliband should have the old tablets of stone. I don't know what he's going to bring to the party.
Well, this actually plays in to a concern a number of members of the cabinet have got with, again, the direction of Keir's government. So somebody was saying to me last week, cabinet minister was saying to me last week, the problem is it's not really Keir's government, it's Ed Miliband's government. Now this is just going to feed into that. Now, let's be clear, a number of people think Torsten Bell's well respected, has some good economic ideas, but politically, as you pointed out,
well, he remembered the one thing.
Exactly, and and this is a government at the moment which basically does not seem to know its posterior from its elbow when it comes to the politics, and this is just again gonna feed into that. And again, it's not as if Keir Starmer is short of MPs. Right? He's got plenty of MPs. He's got a significant amount of talent amongst the new intake he can promote. He's got a significant amount of talent amongst the old intake that he could have promoted. And reaching out for Torsten, whatever his strengths, is something that is already raising eyebrows. And again, the point goes back to the point I think I was making when I was on last week. Keir Starmer is just fighting on too many fronts. There's just too much going on. We've got inflation figures coming out later today, which are predicted to be dire.
Yeah, we've got them here. They're actually down from 2.5 to 2.5% from 2.6%, so not much change, really.
Oh, well, that's not too... Well, actually, that's not too bad. That appears to not be too bad, because there's some concern that figures were going to go up, so maybe he can catch
I mean,
a
it's
break.
not inconceivable there's been a bit of jiggery-pokery there as well.
Well, I mean... I'd be surprised at that, to be honest. But I mean, it's not. No one's going to be breaking out their champagne over.
Well, it's not like yay. You know, we've got 0.1% down. Right, brilliant.
We've still got the issue. We've got an increasing number of Labour MPs coming out going against him on the need for a grooming gang. Obviously, we've got freezing weather. We've still got the flu backlog in hospitals. He can't afford these continued own goals. Not because suddenly, the government's going to go and we're going to have a general election and whatever, but eventually the idea that Keir Starmer just, couldn't run a whelk stall is going to get embedded. And once that gets embedded, then he's never going to dig himself out of it, whatever he does.
Exactly right. Because, we haven't really much talked about Rachel Reeves. One good piece of news, I suppose, for the Labour government is that Tulip Siddiq has been a distraction over the past 24 hours. We haven't really spoken about Rachel Reeves, but she's still deep in the doo-doo as well. And there's a pretty good chance that she won't make it to the one-year anniversary, I would say, of the Labour government. Well,
I think that's obviously dependent on what happens in the markets. I don't agree with you there. Because quite simply, Keir Starmer throws his Chancellor out the balloon within a year. He might as well jump out the balloon himself. We saw with Liz Truss what happened when she tried to dump it all on Kwasi Kwarteng. We obviously famously saw it when Margaret Thatcher fell out with her Chancellor. So, that's
and
just...
he knows that, sure.
Yeah, and he knows that. That's too. So, for good or ill, Rachel is going to be there for a while. I've got to say, though, fair play to her. She did the statement yesterday. She made Mel Stride look like an idiot, to be perfectly honest. She knocked him all around the House of Commons, and that is the one thing.
She did, and she was very good, actually. But unfortunately, an awful lot of the words and the bluster were just that. They were just words and bluster. They weren't. If you actually listen to what they were, there was no truth to them. She kept talking about stability and making people better off. Neither of which are true things that are going on.
Maybe not, but she, it was a good, strong performance, and it did. It did just act as a slight corrective to remember one thing: whatever the problems Labour have got, whatever the problems Reeves has got, that Starmer's got, the country's got, the Tories, frankly, are still a shambles.
Yeah,
the Tories are nowhere. The Tories are nowhere. We keep seeing now Nigel Farage reform consistently polling ahead of the Tories. Yeah. That is. It's not an aberration. That is indicative of where the Tories are at the moment. And despite all the issues that the government's got, until there is some sort of effective opposition that is effective in the sense of being a potential alternative government, whatever problems the government has, Starmer has, Reeves have, ministers have, frankly, they're going to be able to get away with it to an extent because the Tories just aren't on the par.
They're not. Dan, thanks very much indeed. Dan Hodges there from the Mail on Sunday, who's basically questioned this morning the government of service line by Keir Starmer. What on earth is the point of it? It's a load of old cobblers, in his words. This one from Anna in Surrey. Keir Starmer's reputation died with Peter Lynch. He is a moral coward and a disgrace. He is not fit to govern his local scout group. And I think that pretty much says it all. Absolutely right. Dan Hodges, of course, has now been brought into the land of common sense. This is the year of common sense. I keep saying it. With every day that passes, something else brings us closer to the point where we can say common sense has returned to this country. We've still got a long way to go, and you would probably accept that. Sean in Norfolk says, morning, Mike. If that's 3 gone in 6 months, Sue Gray included, come the end of Parliament, there'll be none of the front bench left. Whoop, whoop. Keep up the brilliant work. We keep doing it. Coming up, we'll talk about that inflation figure. It's gone down down to 2.5% from 2.6%. Not exactly a triumph, but sort of no change, really. We'll find out what it all means. Professor Ashwin Kumar will join us to explain.
There's no place for anyone like Charlie Mullins in Reform UK. If Reform UK has a political philosophy, or at least one on which it was founded.
Yeah.
It seems to me, Kevin, that what Reform is doing, and it's misreading it badly, is tacking to the centre ground, thinking if it's to win the general election, it needs to appeal to the centre ground. But take a leaf out of just about every single political movement.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:29. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory. We've got lots to talk about this morning. Right now, let's talk about inflation, because Rachel Reeves has been in the news. She went to China. She came back. She got 600 million quid, which isn't really an awful lot of money when you think about it in the scheme of things. But some good news, I suppose, for Rachel Reeves is inflation hasn't gone up. It's gone down, albeit by a very small matter of 0.1%. 2.6 now, down to 2.5. Let's talk to Professor Ashwin Kumar from the Institute for Public Policy Research, former economic advisor to Gordon Brown. Ashwin, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Some people were suggesting it might be a bad day for Rachel Reeves today, but I suppose she'll be thanking her lucky stars that it's gone in the downward direction.
I think what it signals is that we're sort of back to a more normal inflation environment. We had from in 22 and 23, we had an amazing spike in inflation. We had prices going up on average by 10% a year, food prices even more, 17, 20% a year at times. It felt like every time you went to the supermarket, more and more goods have been going up quite strongly. Whereas now food inflation is at 2%. Things will feel just a bit more normal. You go to the supermarket and you won't expect as many surprises as we were seeing a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So it does feel like it's a return to a more normal inflation picture.
Yeah. Is it though? Because, I mean, this could be as well a blip, couldn't it? Because we've got very, very expensive energy prices right now, and I think electricity is at its highest cost ever. And when it got to this sort of level under Liz Truss, I think she was the one that introduced, sort of payments for people so that they could have, reduced bills rather. So you wonder whether this will last and whether it's just a kind of a low rate for the next foreseeable couple of months. How easy is it to predict that?
Well, we don't have any expectation that it's going to go up by that much. What's true about energy costs is that they are higher than they used to be, but at least they're not still going up. So we're not expecting even further price rises to a significant degree. And so that means some degree of comfort that food, that energy are not we're not expecting them to be going up very dramatically. We are still seeing a little bit of pressure on interest rates in the sense that interest rates are higher than they used to be, as people's mortgage deals come to an end, sometimes people have to remortgage at higher rates than before. So there's a little bit of pressure on housing costs in that way, but we're not in the position of a couple of years ago where inflation pressures were really quite extreme for all of us.
Yeah, you're a former economic advisor to Gordon Brown. What do you make of Rachel Reeves' situation so far? She's only been in 6 months. It's not been easy for her. The budget has been sort of roundly criticised by an awful lot of business groups, but she's still there. A lot of people predicting her demise. Hasn't happened yet. I mean, if you were advising her, what would you advise her to do?
Well, look, I think we're in a sort of shadow period with respect to the budget. The budget was at the end of October, but none of the measures that she announced kick in yet. They kick in at the beginning of April, and they're going to be twofold. On the one hand, you're going to have some higher taxes for employers to pay for public services. But on the other hand, all of that public services is actually going to be to the good of the economy. The government is going to be spending on improving public services and on investing in the future in a way that we haven't been doing for some years. And that investment, that expenditure will actually stimulate the economy, and customers will have just that little bit more money to spend with businesses. We don't yet know exactly what the balance will be between the higher taxes for employers versus the stimulus from that spending. But what we do know is that at the moment we've got the worries about the costs. People haven't yet felt the benefits. I think once we come to see some of that money being spent in the next financial year, actually people might start to appreciate some of the consequences.
But she's already talking about making cuts, though, isn't she?
Well, I think the global context is difficult, and I think Trump is a big part of this. There's a real worry in global markets about exactly what Trump will do. I mean, he's threatening 25% tariffs on Canada, his nearest neighbour. And part of the point about Trump is that, in some sense, he's a bit of a blowhard. He talks big, and what you don't know is what he'll actually deliver, and that creates uncertainty. And markets hate uncertainty.
Right, but that's why the markets are so volatile now, because there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding Rachel Reeves and what she's actually doing. Because an awful lot of the monies that she said she would bring into the Treasury aren't coming in. You know, the tax on farmers isn't likely to make much difference. The tax on VAT rising on private schools isn't likely to make much difference. And yet she's now talking about going after Whitehall and saying she needs to make more cuts there.
Well, look, in a difficult global environment, you've got to be ready to make changes as the world changes. It is a difficult situation. She's doing the right thing, building relationships with other countries other than the US. We've got to be able to do deals with China, India, the EU, if we're going to kind of withstand the US actually taking a different approach over the next few years. But there is a lot of uncertainty, and so what she's got to do is to plan for the eventuality that things don't turn out as well as she would want.
But would you describe her budget as a successful one? So I don't think very many people have so far, so you could be a bit of an outlier there. You could make a name for yourself.
No, what I would say is we're in a sort of shadow period where none of the effects have happened. People have got worries about the downside, and they haven't yet seen the upside.
Right.
So
I think, but never mind what people think. What do you think? And is it a successful budget?
Well, I think the public spending will make a difference to public services themselves. And I think the thing that's really important is that we used to have rules that basically meant there was no public investment at all. From April, we will have the capacity to do some investment in the future. We'll be able to improve tech in health. We'll be able to we'll be able to invest in transport and other things that are going to grow the economy in the future. So I think that will definitely be of benefit.
But we're also wasting a lot of money on interest payments, aren't we, because of the rise in the yields of the bonds, right?
Again, that's the global context. And
yeah, no, but it's still our money that's going down the drain.
It's still our money. And Rachel Reeves will need to kind of watch that carefully, but I'm sure she's very seized of that. But I don't think that we could have got away with letting public services continue to deteriorate even further. Otherwise, we would have had absolutely non-functioning health services, education, we would have had more and more teacher shortages.
Which we have.
We couldn't survive with that.
Well, yeah, but that's what the situation is currently. Has it improved since they've been in, has it?
Well, the budget is about the money that's going to be available from April. So we're all going to be watching to make sure that that money starts to improve public services. The budget said what the plans are. We've got to see the delivery from April onwards.
OK. Well, we'll come back and talk to you then and see if anything's changed. Good to talk to you. Ashwin Kumar, Professor at the Institute for Public Policy Research. I don't think he thinks the budget's any good. He just doesn't want to say so. This is Talk, of course. I'm Mike Graham. How about this from Kevin in Southampton? These positive links with China is very concerning to me. It must be a security threat to the country. And one here from Jane in Dorset says, is it me or is Dan Hodges the spitting image of our useless Prime Minister Keir Starmer? Great show as always. Well, people say he's starting to look like him. But wasn't it interesting, though, that clip we've got of old Stalin talking about how he's going to be changing the way that government is done and how it's going to be a government of absolutely no cronyism and all of that. And he's not wearing glasses. He didn't used to wear glasses. He only got the glasses because somebody told him to wear glasses and people might take him more seriously. So he said, well, I can't possibly do that. I can't afford them. And Lord Ali went, don't worry, I'll give you some free glasses and then you can look like you know what you're doing. Unfortunately, he's been found out. Let's get a voice note from Jennifer.
Morning, Mike. I'm just listening to Dan Hodges. He's absolutely bang on here. He's saying it how I feel. You know what? I'm stumbling over words to try and describe this man. I mean, you know, he's supposed to be competent. He's supposed to be good, brilliant, and the absolute that he has spoken over the years, and like you say, it's coming back to haunt him. and he is being made to look an absolute joke. He is a joke. He is a joke.
He certainly is. Well, he was crowned Plank of the Year, of course, just before the end of last year, rather. This from Natasha on the subject of tea breaks. People probably don't want tea breaks in a chat in case they say something that offends someone and they're then accused of a hate crime. Well, it could be that. People don't like to have tea breaks anymore, apparently. They're not very, shall we say, sociable, because the Gen Zers don't like to talk to people. They don't even like taking phone calls. What hope is there for these people? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:41. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock when it's time for Julie Hartley-Brewer. One lame duck down is the front page of the Daily Mail. Just 24 hours after the Prime Minister insisted he had full confidence in her, Tulip Siddiq resigns over the Mail's corruption probe revelation. So how secure is the crisis-hit Chancellor he also backed feeling today? That's the Daily Mail's front page because, of course, he also insisted he had full confidence in Rachel Reeves. And we're not entirely sure how far she's going to go, notwithstanding what we just heard from our last guest. Let's talk to Alp Mehmet, though, Chairman of Migration Watch UK, because 256 Channel migrants arrived in the UK on 5 boats on Monday. It wasn't quite as cold as it has been, so that may have been one of the reasons. It takes the total for this year to 388. So far, during Keir Starmer's time as Prime Minister, 23,630 migrants have arrived in the UK. And let's not forget, are costing billions and billions of pounds to house in hotels. It would appear that nothing has really changed. Alp, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thank you very much. Long time no speak. Hope you're well.
Yeah, I am well.
Excellent.
I know that you are.
No, nothing much has changed, has it, since the last time we spoke? Keir Starmer's been in for 6 months. We've had Yvette Cooper saying that they're going to stop the boats. They've arrested one bloke from the Kurdish lands in Turkey, who's apparently responsible for bringing loads of people here. They had the Iraqi Prime Minister here yesterday, talking to him about possibly returning people. What's going on?
To be honest, Mike, I remember probably a year ago talking to you and saying that a lot more were going to come and that a lot more will get into trouble, more will die. That's exactly what happened. Guess what? The same thing's going to happen this year, because so far what the government has done and said not only won't it do anything to change the numbers coming in, if anything, it's made it worse. Excuse me. I was at Leyton Orient match last night where we thrashed Derby. So my throat has gone.
No worries. It's obviously it's a good reason to have a bad throat. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that whatever the Labour government think they're going to do, they're not really doing, because all of those 388 people that have come into this country just this year so far, and it's only, you know, January the 15th, are all being put up in hotels, are all being given allowances, are all being given food, are all being given, you know, free heating and all the rest of it. It's costing the country an awful lot of money. And so it's no different from what it was like under the Tories. In fact, it's probably worse.
Well, it is worse because they've gotten rid of the only potential deterrent. There is nothing to deter people from coming until the message goes out that if you come here illegally, then you're not going to stay. I'm afraid they're going to keep coming, and there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, frankly, around the world who would give their eye teeth to come to this country and be welcomed in the way that you just described. We've had 150,000, 151,000 since this all started in 2018. They're the ones that we know about.
Yeah.
There's probably at least another 50 to 100,000 that we don't know about. Add to that those who are here illegally already. What we're doing is simply adding to the illegal population of this country, and nothing that the government has done will change that.
No.
Until they detain, deal quickly, and remove, then I'm afraid they will keep coming. And that just isn't going to happen.
Right. And also, as Europe becomes tougher in migration, lots of countries now in Europe are performing better than we are in terms of sending people back and not allowing people to settle. They're going to head to Calais. They're going to head to Calais so that they can get here because they know that Britain is still a pretty soft touch.
They've known that for a long time, and nothing that's happened has changed that perception. You say that the Europeans are getting tougher, but the fact is that there are still hundreds of thousands making their way into the EU, really not just from the east, but from all over. They're coming from Asia, they're coming from Africa, they're making their way through the Balkans. They're buying packages, frankly, that get them from Afghanistan to Iran, to Turkey, then go to Greece. The easiest bit at the moment is actually getting across the channel.
Yeah.
And that is simply a fact. And all this nonsense that we heard last week about removals, 16,400 being removed. Yeah, the Prime Minister actually said that there were only 4 volunteers. I'm sorry, Prime Minister, but I don't believe that.
Right.
We know that a lot of those who are going back are the sort of the easy pickings.
Right.
They're the ones who, frankly, are being paid to go back.
Exactly. I mean, the whole point of removing people surely is to remove them, whether they like it or not. You don't ask them if they'd like to be removed, you just remove them, don't you?
Well, there were 606 Brazilians who went home for Christmas.
Right.
Every one of them got £3,000.
Ridiculous.
Including babies. We don't know how many of those that were returned, have been returned so far, have actually gone because they've been given a bit of dosh to be getting on with when they get back.
I know.
So I'm afraid until we get serious about our laws, the legal framework, the Human Rights Act, really, which embeds the ECHR in our law, until we change that I'm afraid there is nothing that's going to prevent us from. There's nothing to prevent the people who are coming across the channel illegally from doing just that. That's going to continue.
Absolutely. Oh, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Hope your throat gets a bit better. It was probably well worth it, I'm sure, at Leighton Orient. Elk Mehmet there, Chairman of Migration Watch UK. Back to some of the messages here. Martin says, back in the 90s, an engineering firm I worked for had a tea lady coming round with a trolley and a large teapot of cups twice a day. Although it wasn't really a break, it made your day better. Yeah, I mean, I've worked in places where they've had, you know, people coming around with tea. It's a good thing. What, a tea break? They're working from home on a permanent tea break, says Thomas from Port Stewart. And Dean from Dagenham says, morning, Mike, no disrespect to the prof economist, but he was talking absolute tosh. Does he really believe what he was spouting? No, I don't think he does. He's a former advisor to Gordon Brown. Of course he's going to say the budget wasn't bad, but everybody knows it was awful, absolutely hopeless. Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Morning, Mike. Brian from South End. Another poor day from Starmer and the Labour, and yet another betrayal of the British people. You know, how many more times is he going to betray them? You know, all the victims and families of IRA are now going to have to sit and watch while the people who actually ordered these atrocities are compensated for being in jail for blowing up the British people. And while these get all compensation, you know, there are still people in this country.
Unbelievable stuff, isn't it? Brian, thank you very much indeed. This is on the news that thanks to the human rights background of Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, there is now going to be an ability for people like Gerry Adams to claim compensation for being incarcerated during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Gerry Adams, of course, who was the head of Sinn Féin, linked in many ways to the IRA. He's always denied that he was ever in the IRA, but I think many people would beg to differ. But isn't it ridiculous that the people are betrayed, the victims and their families are being betrayed? We should not be giving taxpayers' money to Gerry Adams, for heaven's sake. 7:50, back after this.
I'd be able to sue my employer, or it's the other way round, and someone with blue hair would be complaining because I was saying, well, of course trans women are men because that's biological truth. Now, whether or not that is a philosophical belief that is protected under law, no, it's biological reality. It shouldn't even be considered a belief. Someone could sue their employer because they overheard a conversation of people saying things they didn't agree with. What on earth has happened to this country?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:54. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Timothy says, for goodness sake, why is the Navy not just turning the migrants around, if just for their own safety? Well, it's a good point. Let's talk about potholes, because that's in the news today. An awful lot of money going down the drain, literally. UK drivers are paying £579 million for pothole damage to repair it last year, and that's basically coming out of taxpayer funds. Let's talk to Mr. Pothole, our favourite pothole expert, pothole campaigner, of course, Mark Morell. Mark, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Now, I'm also reading this morning that an awful lot of councils are not paying out for people whose cars are being damaged by potholes. They've got something like 60,000 complaints from people, and they've only paid out on 10,000 of them.
Yeah, I think they're abusing Section 58 of the Highways Act that gives them a defence, so that if they can prove that they got a reasonable inspection regime and repair policy, and they meet those, they reject claims. But over the years I've been campaigning, what they say is an actionable defect is got deeper and bigger, and repair schedules to carry out the works. There's some horrendous potholes not that far from me. And they said they're going to repair it in 26 weeks. Well, if there's an incident between that 6-month period, they would have a defence in law. I think it's actually got to a point it's criminal.
Yeah, it really is. And I've noticed something in the last sort of few months as well, that an awful lot of potholes are not only getting more frequently found, but there's also great big, much deeper ones as well now. You know, so the roads and our infrastructure are getting sort of damaged with every single day that passes. I'm now, where I sort of drive around on a regular basis, you know where there are really, really deep ones, and you have to stay away from them.
Yeah, I mean, it's making people look at the roads in terms of defending their vehicle from potholes more than looking at further along when you talk to drive along the road. Our roads are, unless the government invest in resurfacing our roads, we're wasting our time. 12 years of doing it. I've studied every aspect. My evidence is part of the Transport Select Committee inquiry that could improve potholes. We're seeing poor quality repairs. We're seeing doing repairs where the road isn't sound, a bit like a dentist, a temporary filling won't last, proper filling. But unless you resurface the roads, I can't see, and I've got no faith in any government or any political party actually tackling the problem of our road. If you look at the announcement for next year's funding, £1.6 billion, and they said record amount. Well, 2021, it was £1.78 billion. So how could that be a record? You know, I mean,
exactly. So they're actually spending less money. And also the cost of repairing a car damaged by a pothole is now likely to be £300 on average, and that's if you're lucky, because all of this 579 million quid is being paid out by people, and it's probably coming off their insurance. Their insurance is going up, you know, more cost, more inflation, you know, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, and that £570 million is only from the AA members. I mean, if you include RAC, Green Flag, and all the other drivers that are on the road, you know, you're talking probably 3 or 4 times that. I mean, there was a study done a while ago saying that badly maintained roads was costing our economy £14.4 billion. So I can't see why they economically don't understand, you know, Rachel and accounts, as she's been nicknamed, that you actually invest to save. That's what you're supposed to do with in proper economics in terms of understanding asset values and what they do for the economy. So, yeah, I've lost complete faith in them all.
It's shocking, isn't it? They've taken a slightly different approach in a little town in Wales, the Celriog Valley a town, where they've decided to put a sign up saying, welcome to Pothole Land. They've turned it into a theme park. Deepest, longest, widest potholes in Wales. 2 kilometres of award-winning potholes with very little actual road to spoil your fun. I mean, it's quite funny, but it's tragic in a way, isn't it?
It is, and I've done some filming with French television because we've become an international embarrassment. We're called the Kingdom of Potholes.
Really? That's awful. Because everywhere you go, I have to say, whether it's France, Spain, Ireland, Cyprus, whatever country you go to in Europe, the roads are immaculate. And we seem to have by far and away the worst roads of all time. But we'll keep up the good work, Mark. Good to see you. Mr. Pothole, still fighting the good fight. Let's get a voice note on public services from Mike.
Hi, Mike. Mike in Cheshire here. We're just listening to that professor, the economist, talking about how throwing money at the public services is going to make it all better for us. Well, the public services are a drain, and if you throw money at them, and you don't ask for working practice reforms or reforms of any kind and just keep throwing the money at them, it remains a drain on society. They don't produce anything, they actually take.
They do, absolutely right. I mean, the problem is that everything the government does is a drain on the taxpayer at the end of the day. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Jay says this, morning, Mike. Gen Zs don't like talking on the phone anymore because they realise AI has taken over with the automated response system. When you phone anywhere, you can never speak to a human on the phone anymore, so they have no need to. This is the beginning of AI taking over the lazy, unsocialised world, increasing anxiety and depression. Oh, dear. Well, you can always call this number. You know what it is, 0344 499 1000. If you're feeling anxious or depressed, I'll cheer you up. Guaranteed. No question. This is Morning Glory. Loads more coming up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here then. We've got loads going on. We've got the front page of the Daily Mail, one lame duck down. Just 24 hours after the Prime Minister insisted he had full confidence in her, Tulip Siddiq has resigned. And he's lost yet another minister, the second one in 6 months. Louise Haigh, of course, had to step down as the Secretary of State for Transport some weeks and months ago because it turned out she had a conviction for fraud. We've also got a story on the front page of the Telegraph in which it reveals that Sir Keir Starmer is going to be, thanks to his human rights background, having to pay compensation to Gerry Adams over his incarceration during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, when he was thought to be associated with, of course, the IRA. He was head of Sinn Féin latterly, sort of rehabilitated himself into a politician, but he never really got over those links, and a lot of people think it's entirely wrong that he should be able to claim compensation, particularly relatives of the victims of the IRA, and I'd have to say I would agree with them. Coming up, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith joins us, former Conservative Party leader. He's going to talk to us about the Chagos Islands deal, because it's apparently in the balance, according to the Financial Times this morning. Mauritius believed to be ready to sign a deal for 9 billion quid worth of British money to go south, literally, but there's some suggestion that there's some cold feet in Downing Street about doing anything before Donald Trump becomes the next president of the United States of America, which happens, of course, on Monday. Lots of allegations flying around about sleaze and corruption and cronyism. I wonder what Sir Keir Starmer's going to do about that.
Change Britain, we must change ourselves. We need to clean up politics. I will restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism.
Yeah, this message timed just before he became Prime Minister back in July. He hasn't cracked down on cronyism. In fact, he's had to get rid of 3 top female operatives in his government. Sue Gray, first of all, as we said, Tulip Siddiq yesterday, and Lou Haig in between. It's not going brilliantly to get rid of cronyism, is it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Another fascinating story, actually, from the FT, which I haven't mentioned to you yet, is Elon Musk. His name is back in the frame because apparently China has discussed using Elon Musk as a broker to help deal with their TikTok problem in the United States of America, because the word is that the bill passed by Congress in April that requires TikTok's Beijing-based parent to sell its stake in the app or face a ban means that they could lose TikTok altogether in America. And wouldn't it be interesting if Elon Musk went to bat for the Chinese? A man I'm sure will have a view on all things to do with China is Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. Sir Ian, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Morning, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let's kick off with China. Rachel Reeves has just come back from China, having got what might be described as a pretty paltry deal, £600 million worth of investment, which is approximately 60 times less than Indonesia got, 30 times less than Peru got. What do you make of the government's approach to China at the moment?
Well, it's a mess. The government has got this absurd idea that if they rush to China on their bended knees, China somehow is going to give them the thing they need for growth, which has collapsed as a result of their budget, which has smashed into small businesses, particularly, and farmers. So going to China is a terrible decision. China is guilty of genocide in Xinjiang amongst the Uyghur, which is the eradication of a whole ethnic group. Most of the men are now in slave labor. They work on products like, for example, the solar arrays that we import now as a result of the government's policy on net zero, which is mad. We're importing thousands of these things, but they're made in China, and polysilicon is part of them, and that is made basically in Xinjiang by slave labor. And it goes on, you know, the Shane, this company that the government wants to register here in the London Stock Exchange, they are suspected of using slave-made cotton in their products, which they refuse to answer questions over. I mean, it goes on and on. They're threatening Taiwan. They're threatening a blockade. They're threatening to basically invade. They're building a navy at a rate of knots you simply can't believe. This is a threatening country, and the government has behaved astonishingly in turning over what was going on before and now acting as though they're a great ally and friend, which is an utter disaster. It'd be like we were doing in the 1930s, ignoring the threat of Hitler, only to find that everything he said he would do, he does, which is exactly what President Xi has done.
Well, quite. And, of course, it looks as though the Chagos Islands deal is somehow tinged by China as well, because a lot of people think that, you know, that has China's sort of fingerprints all over it. You know, at the beginning, when the conversations were being had between David Lammy and our government and Mauritius, there was a different government there, and they tried to sort of rush it through before that election. Then, now there's a new government. They've sort of seemingly tried to sort of bribe them with payment promises of £9 billion in order to sort of give it away. I mean, I've never heard of a deal where you give something to somebody, but then you also pay them in addition.
Yeah, there is no need to do a Chagos deal, first and foremost, because the ruling at the UN doesn't have direct effect on the British government. So in other words, it was what's called an advisory ruling.
Yes.
But honestly, there are really serious issues here. The Chagosians, who I think it was a mistake to move them out in the 1960s, we should let them go back to their home. They don't want to be run by Mauritius. All they want to do is remain as British citizens. They just want their homes back, which I think is quite reasonable, and we could do that. We don't need to do the deal. Mauritius was never really part of Chagos Islands. It actually was only used as an administrative centre by the British many, many years ago for ease and for help for the British, not for Chagos. And so the result is that this deal is a disaster. We're going to pay for what we already have, huge sums of taxpayers' money. This is a strategic centre, vital, vital area in our position. It covers all the trade routes going east and west. China's had its eyes on that area completely. And the Americans, I know, talking to many of those who are involved with the Trump arrangements and also Republicans, are deeply disquieted by what the British government is doing without any real reason for doing it in the first place. And we should stop this at once. And Trump, I think, will be saying to them, this is a bad deal and it risks our security and we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, the Keir Starmer government isn't known so far for kind of going back on anything or having second thoughts, and they keep pressing ahead with their ideas no matter how unpopular they seem to be. But they don't seem to quite know what to do on this Chagos Islands deal.
No, well, they were rushing. The worst bit about it was they brought in Mr. Powell, who used to advise Tony Blair, and he and the others were rushing to the Mauritius to try and get a deal out of the new government in a hurry to miss President Trump's inauguration. That has stalled completely. I heard the latest thing was that the Mauritian government were asking only for 50 years, not a 90-year lease. So this whole thing is falling apart, and they won't disclose the amount of money that they would have to pay to Mauritius. They won't tell Parliament that. They won't tell anybody. So we've been complaining very loudly that they should not be rushing this deal before a new president is inaugurated on the 20th, because US has real skin in the game on this. It's their base that's there. They lease it from the UK government, and they should be able to say whether or not they want this deal to go ahead. And I understand lots and lots of Republican politicians in America do not think this deal should go ahead. They don't want China's interference, which of course is exactly what China wants to do, which is to try and get a land grab here and to put themselves in this area to mess around with the US and the UK and the free world's ability to be able to control and protect the trade routes.
It does seem extraordinary, doesn't it? And just going back to China for a moment, I mean, what is it that China, do you think, has in mind with this £600 million deal that they gave to Rachel Reeves? Also, the deal that they want to get involved with for wind turbines and for solar panels and all those things that you mentioned. You know, Ed Miliband, it seems, doesn't care about national security, he just cares about net zero.
Yeah, I think this is the most ill-informed and poor Secretary of State for the Environment as possible to imagine having put in post. The reality is that China went from nowhere in the production of solar arrays and all the other net zero stuff, went from absolutely nowhere in the last 10 years to dominant in the world. How do they do that? They do it because against WTO rules, the Chinese central bank subsidizes all bids of Chinese companies, I gather to almost 100% of bid value, which undercuts everybody in the free market. The second bit of it is they use slave labor. And slave labor means you don't pay anybody any money. They have to do this under threat of bullying, violence and death. And this is going on all the time. As I said earlier on, polysilicon, which is made in Xinjiang, is made by slave labor. This has been completely ignored by the British government, who say that they would stand up against slave labor. And I asked them a question of that yesterday. And the reality is they're already importing thousands of these arrays, which they want to litter across the countryside in this mad rush to net zero, no matter what the cost to consumers. But they're doing this using products made by slave labor, and they don't just use it. Their cotton made in Xinjiang, which is 40% of, well, cotton, is also made using slave labor. China doesn't care a damn about net zero because they're building coal-fired power stations at a rate of knots in China. So all this stuff is made using dirty, dirty fuels. So it's ironic that Miliband and co. want to get cozy with China when China is basically sticking two fingers up in the air to all the ambitions over net zero. You couldn't make this up if you tried.
You really couldn't. And more noise is being made as well from inside of government that, you know, they want to reach out to China because it's a very important part of the global economy, and they must make sure that they can sort of somehow, you know, take account of the fact that Trump's new government might put tariffs on Britain and they might need to move away from America. I mean, it's almost hard to believe that that's their thought process, but it seems to be.
Yeah, this is a government that likes to jump into swimming pools when the water's running out.
Yeah.
So let's just look at this. The European Union is now talking about tariffs on electric cars. China made a decision to tell all of their battery companies, by the way, they've dominated battery production for years. Every battery used in cars in the UK in electric vehicles are made in China. And we'll never be able to compete with on that again because of the points I made earlier on. A lot of the minerals that are used in this are mined and used, made by slave labor. But the whole idea about what we're doing is when Europe is now talking about tariffs against dumping of those electric cars in Europe, America is going to tariff China on the basis of dumping of their electric vehicles. We are the one country that goes, oh, let's go to China and say how much we love China and that we're going to do business with people that are appalling. I mean, this is a brutal government. It executes more people than any other country on the planet. It practices organ harvesting from those prisoners and others. And you have to take the organs out when people are still alive. They export those to countries like the UK. I mean, this government is every bit as brutal and ghastly as Nazi Germany was back in the 1930s. But this government seems to think it wants to go and cozy up to them, which I find utterly astonishing for all those poor people that are being decimated by the Chinese government.
Absolutely right. Can I just ask you one final question about the story on the front page of the Telegraph today, Sir Ian? Prime Minister to pay damages to Gerry Adams. An awful lot of disquiet about this, particularly amongst the families of victims of the IRA. But it's apparently some kind of absolution, if you like, for Britain, because we've got this absolute commitment, according to Hilary Benn, Northern Ireland Secretary, to the Human Rights Act. It seems a very bizarre move, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's wrong. The government's wrong to do this. The last government had to come up with some legislation that eventually protected those who were there to settle the peace. So many soldiers, I must tell you, I served in Northern Ireland and I lost a particularly good friend who was murdered, tortured, it appears. Bodies never been disclosed or found. There are a lot of British soldiers that face serious and difficult decisions over there, and this was all down to the terrorism. So what we're now heading for is a government that seems to think that those who were part of that process, that were part of the process that was bringing British soldiers in to protect the innocent civilians, will now find that law is made on their behalf rather than to balance this so that we can end this perpetual pursuit of soldiers and others and policemen in Northern Ireland that were trying to do their duty. I just find the only way to settle this was the way that it was being done before. And this other issue about almost every single legal brain, every single government advisor and official that has been in government has advised the government that this original judgment by the Supreme Court was wrong, and that the appeal that's going on now should have been proceeded with because this needs to be stopped. Ministers should have the right, and was always believed had the right, to make these decisions, and the appeal court has turned that over. And I think everyone thinks, everybody in the legal profession that's got half a brain thinks that this actually was a wrong decision. And so the government is now acting in a peculiar, not just pro-human rights at all, actually, but what about the human rights of those who were there, sent there to protect the civilians? That seems to have been dismissed and chucked overboard.
Absolutely right. Sir Ian, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, MP, former Conservative Party leader there, formerly served in Northern Ireland, of course, as well. Families of the victims of Northern Ireland horrors and bombings from the IRA are absolutely disgracefully disappointed by this. Suzanne Dodd, whose police officer father Stephen was killed in the Harrods bombing in 1983, said, considering the IRA victims have not received any compensation, how could Gerry Adams get compensation? My father was killed 41 years ago, and it is highly unacceptable to hear that. Absolutely right. I mean, is there anything this government can get right? There doesn't seem to be. Bam Bam in Belfast says, I'm absolutely livid that Jerry Adams is getting reparations. Seriously? Is Keir getting ready to sell Northern Ireland down the river? Good question. Let's talk to Chris in London and wants to talk about the Chagos Islands. Chris, hi.
Yeah, morning, mate.
Morning. What can I do for you?
Well, there's a few things I wanted to say. First of all, why I copied you in on a message that I've sent to all the Reform MPs to ask the question and bring Lammy to the House because he's lied to the House of Commons. The same as well, what's his face? The new ambassador to the US did twice and got sacked.
Peter Mandelson.
Peter Mandelson, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Creepy himself. Now, this deal, it's quite unbelievable. The original deal was done with the government of Mauritius that was then outvoted and a new government came.
Lost the election, And then we were told the new government weren't that keen on doing the deal anyway.
They didn't want to do the deal. But the funny thing is, and I mean, this needs to be looked at, all right, because it stinks. The legal representative for Mauritius is Felipe Sands, KC, who was the founder of the Matrix Chambers, who employed the Wicked Witch and Sir Keir Starmer. They're the Matrix Chambers actually earns more in legal aid on human rights issues than any other law firm in the country. Now, why is it being rushed? Why is Lammy lying in the House? Why is it being rushed through before Trump gets inaugurated? And what's the relationship? I mean, what's the deal? Why is Felipe Sands getting involved? Is he doing the normal 30%? Because if we're giving them $9 billion, 30% is a nice cut. I wonder how much he's sharing around.
Well, exactly right. And also, nobody's agreed any of this in Parliament. It was never signed off in Parliament. It was never put before the House. It was all agreed, apparently, and then announced in Parliament as if it was a done deal. And that's the other thing they tried to do. They tried to rush it through in the summer recess before Parliament came back.
Exactly. And I'll tell you something else. I mean, the Chagosians don't want it. The deal. I don't know if you know this, but in Mauritius, because the Chagosians didn't want the deal, all right? The old government that was pushing for the deal, they actually came up. It was illegal to mention the Chagosian Islands in Mauritius with the punishment being a 10-year jail sentence.
Blimey. Yeah, I know. I mean, this is the problem. People say Mauritius is not one of the greatest governments in the world, rather it's one of the worst. Chris, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. A lot of questions. We'll see if we can get you a lot of answers. Let's get a voice note from Dean on Free Speech.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always. I think Keith Starling, and his idea around the pubs and what you can and can't say, he's more worried about what people are saying about him. Because I'll tell you what, when I'm in the pub, all I hear is people slag this government off and slag this Prime Minister off. In my opinion, and most of the people in that pub on a Friday and Saturday night, is that he's utterly useless and the worst Prime Minister with the worst government we've ever had.
That's exactly right, Dean. I mean, I said this when we played the tape, played that clip from Lee Anderson at the weekend, talking about Rachel from Accounts and, Mastermind David Lammy. I said there's a reason why Reform are popular is because that's how people talk in the pub. It's exactly what they say. Absolutely right. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We've got loads more to do. Coming up, we're going to be joined by Martina Bett, political correspondent from The Sun. We've got lots to talk to her about. This is Talk.
way that she's behaving. And she's a really, as I said, a class act. She's somebody that I think isn't in it for the kicks. You know, she's not there. This isn't all about her. This was all about them. And today they've taken on her and William the joint patronage of this. And I just feel that that's all about raising awareness for cancer. It's all about raising awareness for the hard work that the staff do. And I think that's the difference. It's not about them. It's not about monetarising their position. It's about genuinely saying thank you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:25. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. How about this? I'd like to know when the government are going to pay me compensation for having to live here, says Jason in Hastings. Well, that's a very good point. And Steve says, Professor Kumar, an economist, God help us if he's educating our future leaders and politicians. Absolute guff. Well, John has got a view on that as well.
Morning, Mike. John in Wolverhampton, just out walking the dog. Regarding your guest, Mr. Kumar, I think the clue was in your introduction, former advisor to Gordon Brown. Didn't Gordon Brown sell the gold when it was at low price? Cost the country a fortune? Just asking for a friend.
Yeah, he certainly did, John. You're quite right. I'm not sure if Professor Kumar advised him to do that, but we'll ask him next time he's on, shall we? Let's talk to Martina Bett, political correspondent for The Sun. Breaking news this morning, inflation has gone down to 2.5% from 2.6%. Not particularly a big jump or any jump really at all. Doesn't really mean terribly much to anyone. But we've got lots to talk about with Martina. Martina, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Very good to see you. Nice to talk to you. Let's kick things off with a very powerful piece in The Sun today on page 10 by Harriet Wistrich, director of the Centre for Women's Justice, talking about this terrible case of Kiana Dawes, who took her own life after suffering 2.5 years of abuse at the hands of her ex-partner. And the piece really is all about how jurors in these cases need help to accept how terribly trapped so many people feel in these abusive relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, despite clear evidence of controlling behaviour, harassment, physical violence, Kiana's ex-partner was cleared of manslaughter. So the point that is made in this piece is that it raises serious concerns about whether or not our justice system is basically failing victims of coercive control, which is a form of domestic abuse where victims are manipulated, isolated and emotionally broken down. So they see suicide as the only escape, really. Yeah. And, you know, the statistics can't really be ignored. She goes into these really damning statistics where in England and Wales, I think, 93 victims are suspected to have taken their lives after experiencing domestic abuse between April 22 and March 23. To put that into perspective, 80 women were killed by a current or former partner during that same period. So they're very damning statistics and a wake-up call, really.
Yes, and the Lancashire Police particularly are singled out for sort of poor investigative skills, if you like. They failed to charge him. He was bailed. It was during his bail period that he continued to terrorise her. She was a hairdresser from Fleetwood. And I think that's another thing that we noticed from the justice system. I mean, we saw, did we not, when a lot of people were being released from prison at the back end of last year by the Labour government, many of them had been jailed for abuse, and some of them were being released without even their victims being told that they were coming out of prison. So there's clearly a lot of gaps in the justice system here.
Yeah, absolutely. And she makes the case for this, and she says that serious reforms are needed. And, you know, the IOPC rightly called out police failings in this case, but, you know, reforms must go beyond reviews and result in action. So there needs to be accountability. And as she said, jurors also need more guidance on how coercive control works and the mental impact I think it can have. So there's definitely like a long way to go to make this better.
Absolutely right. Let's talk about some of the political coverage this morning. You've got a piece in the paper about Rachel Reeves opening the door to emergency spending cuts. We were just talking to an economist earlier, Ashwin Kumar, who was very upbeat about the budget and saying, oh, well, you know, the good things aren't going to come until April. But it looks as though there's going to be more tightening of the belts, particularly in Whitehall. Where do you think she's going to look to do that?
For sure. I think she's going to wait for the OBR update, but I think the spending cuts are coming. Listening to the Treasury Minister, Darren Jones, this morning, he did finally rule out, even though Downing Street wasn't ruling out yesterday, an emergency budget, or, as he said, a major fiscal event in March. But this is not to say that they're not going to, in a March statement, in a spring statement, she's not going to announce a string of spending cuts. And again, he reiterated the fact that every department has got to go through every single line to make sure that, that all the savings that can be made are made.
And of course, it's Prime Minister's questions today, so no doubt we would expect Kemi Badenoch to centre in on the resignation of Tulip Siddiq yesterday afternoon. A lot of people say it was a little bit too little too late. She's been in trouble really since mid-December, hasn't she? And she finally referred herself to the parliamentary watchdog, the ethical watchdog, last week. Yesterday, even though apparently she says she's done nothing wrong, and the Prime Minister says she's done nothing wrong, she becomes the third woman who's sort of left the government. You know, Louise Haigh left back end of last year, Sue Gray gone as well. It looks like a bit of a habit for the Labour government.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's not looking good. I know this morning Darren Jones said it does not show a lack of judgment from the Prime Minister, but he certainly does. Keir Starmer is was a human rights lawyer, so he should have been aware of this. He should have been, when he appointed her as an anti-corruption minister, he should have thought maybe she's not the right person to do this particular job. But instead, even last week he said that he had full confidence in her. And then yesterday, you say that she was cleared. Yes, Laurie Magnus, the ethics advisor, said that she didn't breach the ministerial code. Having said that, he did say that she should have been more alert to her responsibilities and to the conflict of interest that it could have arisen from that.
Yes, well, exactly right. I mean, Harry Cole put out that one paragraph, which is fairly damning, isn't it, that said basically that you might wish to re-evaluate what rights and responsibilities you would give her in that role, because it seems extraordinary as well. But she's a close friend of Keir Starmer's. You know, Keir Starmer went to visit her family and her aunt in Bangladesh when he was a backbench MP. He'd also, I think, hosted her in the House of Commons when he was leader of the opposition. And as recently, we think, as last month, he was meeting with people connected to that Bangladeshi government who were visiting London.
Yeah, it's an incredible lack of judgment. And again, I think Labour MPs are not going to be impressed in the way that this has been handled. I think, we're all glad that this has arrived, because the story, which every day there was going to be more allegation against her, more claims against her. So it's good that he's finally put an end to it. But, Prime Minister's questions today, he's going to have quite a lot to answer to, Kemi Badenoch. He
really will. And as a couple of the papers point out this morning, he also has full confidence in Rachel Reeves. So we have to wonder whether she might be the next one to fall.
Yeah, and Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride yesterday, compared her position to a Shakespearean tragedy and said to go or not to go. That is the question now. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's not an enviable position that the Chancellor is in. She came out fighting yesterday, but, the economic picture is not great. Business confidence is on its knees, really. We had report after report saying that businesses have lost the confidence in the Labour government. There was quite a damning leader column in the FT yesterday, I think. Yeah. So we'll have to see where this goes and if the economic picture improves, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Martina, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Martina Bett, political correspondent at The Sun, giving us the lowdown there on what's coming up today. Prime Minister's questions should be a big one because, of course, Kemi Badenoch has got an open goal. because it's not very often you get, of course, somebody with whom the Prime Minister had full confidence only a couple of days ago to suddenly have to resign from her position in the Cabinet. And it's the second Minister who's had to resign. Of course, Louise Haigh had to resign because it turned out that she was a convicted fraudster, which apparently the Prime Minister wasn't aware of, even though he was aware that there was something in her past that might not be entirely good. The same goes for Tulip Siddiq, who has been basically in the firing line for well over a month, and it's taken more than that for her to finally resign. And of course, what we do know is that Keir Starmer does not like to make U-turns, and he didn't want her to have to see her go. And he's even said the door is open for you to return. Well, that's going to be a bit tricky if she ends up getting charged with some kind of offence by the Bangladeshi investigative authorities. Shocking stuff. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Good morning, Mike. It's Chris in Northants here. Great show. Thanks for being a shining beacon of common sense in this world of madness. On Jerry Adams, if I remember, wasn't he an MP who refused to take his seat? So he was getting his wages for doing nothing anyway. So if he should get any compensation, in my mind, it should come out of the MP's pension fund, which, let's face it, is our money anyway.
That's a very good point. Yeah, he refused, didn't he, to turn up in Parliament on the grounds that he wouldn't come and pledge allegiance to the Crown. But I think I'm right in saying that they also continued to file expenses. They also continued to claim their salary. And it's a very good question and a point as to whether or not he would actually be in receipt of a government pension, because that's compensation enough, surely. I don't think he needs any more money. That's absolutely right. 0344 499 1000. Rob from East Yorkshire says, morning, Mike. Professor Kumar seems to believe that increased public spending produces growth. Public spending sucks money out of the real economy. Well, this is the problem. You know, with Labour chancellors, they always think that the way to make successful economies work is to put loads of public money into them. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. That's why they didn't have any money left when they left back in 2010. When famously Liam Byrne left the note for the Chancellor, next one coming in the Treasury, saying, we've spent all the money, there's none left. One from Simon in Aberdeen, who knows about these things. Mike, 0.1% reduction in inflation is a rounding error, no more, no less. Well said. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:38. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Andy says this from Knots. Ray potholes is an old saying, but here it goes. We used it to drive on the left of the road. Now we drive on what's left of the road. Yes, I think we used to drive on the left of the road. Now we drive on what's left of the road. You're absolutely right. This one from Mark. Rachel from Accounts revelling in a £600 million China deal. Wow, that's no more than the transfer of 3 top Premier League footballers being sold to Saudi Arabia. It's pocket money. What a joke this Labour government has become, says Mark in Leeds. And one from Lisa, in Cleveland. Can you ask... oh, no, we've had that one. Morning, Mike. Lord help us. Millipede sounds like he's talking to a load of 4-year-olds when he's in that mode. He's wearing that blue jumper. It's absolutely right. We should have another look at that perhaps later on. Let's talk to Sophie Lane now, who's a regional executive for Property Mark, because a lot of people talk about housing in this country and not very many people understand how it all works, what it all does, why there's no supply, why there's houses being built, it would seem, but so many people still unable to find one. The Renters' Rights Bill is something that's out there right now. It's heading to the House of Lords after MPs voted on limitations to the amount tenants will pay on the rent in advance to 1 month, because we've heard about all sorts of horrible gouging practices being done in California this week by people who are trying to rent homes while obviously they rebuild the ones that have been burnt down. And they've got laws in place where people can't just rip off people who are trying to find accommodation. But whether the Renters' Rights Bill will end up intact, let's find out from Sophie. Sophie, very good morning to you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks, not at all. It goes to the House of Lords. Last night, MPs voted to limit the amounts tenants have to pay on rent in advance to 1 month. What was being asked for then? How much rent was being asked for in advance?
It depends on the circumstances. I mean, I've been in the industry quite a long time. We generally, as agents, do not ask for rent up front unless there's a valid reason to do so.
Right.
Whether that tenant can't pass the referencing procedure, or whether they're moving here and don't yet have income, or they want to use their savings. I have heard of practices in other areas of the country where rent is being taken in advance without that reason, and it's great that that's going to be stopped. But I think doing a blanket ban is going to cause more problems for renters in certain sectors that rely on rent in advance to secure housing in an already difficult market.
Yeah. I mean, it is a very difficult market if you're renting, isn't it? But I guess it depends on where you are. I mean, obviously, I live in London, and London is a very competitive place to try and get any kind of property, whether you're buying or renting. But what's it like across the country?
It's the same across. I mean, it's spread across. I'm down in Cornwall. And you'd think Cornwall, being the quiet place we're meant to be, housing down here is really hard to come by. Our council have got about 800 people in emergency accommodation at the moment, and yeah, we are a bit dire. It's countrywide.
Yeah, it is. And how does that change? I mean, is it a supply problem? Is it the fact that people can't afford to buy, so there's more people renting?
It's varying factors. It's a bit of a perfect storm at the moment. Obviously, new initiatives came in for landlords, which has pushed a lot of landlords out of the rental sector. So they've sold up. We're seeing less property available on the market, less people moving around, so less accommodation. This is pushing rents up. Also, mortgage rates are pushing rents up for landlords because unlike popular belief, landlords aren't sat there without mortgages. They have mortgage rates, and they've been, obviously, as we've seen over the last year or so, increasing dramatically. So this is pushing rents up, but it does come down to supply. There is not enough property for the amount of people currently needing housing.
Right. And one of the things that happened as well under the last government, I think it was they started to tax more people who had a lot of buy-to-let properties, and that supposedly made them sell those properties rather than keep them. So that presumably took those properties off the market.
Absolutely. I mean, landlords, understandably, they are investing their money. They are providing a service because there is not enough housing and social housing. So they are providing a service, but they are also running as a business. General landlords are not, they're not running as a charity. Right. They are there. Generally, most landlords are supplementing their pensions or their income, or it's better than putting it in the bank. So they do need to make an income from it. Otherwise, at the moment, most landlords are breaking even or making a loss. Right. And that means they have to sell, which leads to less stock.
And presumably the influx of people coming into the country isn't helping either, because we've had more than 1 million people coming in for the last 2 or 3 years, net immigration. So that's quite a problem as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. The more people, the more housing is needed. We're not building at the rate we need to build. So, simple maths is that it's just not stacking up.
Right, exactly right. So how long before this Renters' Rights Bill gets into law, if it passes through the House of Lords? I mean, I know it's a laborious process. Don't expect you to know the ins and outs of Westminster politics, but do we get it into law by the summer?
Sadly, I do know those intricacies because I'm one of those legal nerds. But yeah, so it obviously got passed through Commons yesterday, so it'll go to the next 5 stages at the Lords. I mean, Labour are pushing this; they want this in by spring, which is likely. Majority that they have, even with the Lord's scrutiny on it. So we're going to be looking at it by summer.
Okay, well, let's have a look. We'll keep an eye on it. Sophie, thanks very much indeed. Sophie Lang, Regional Executive Property Mark there with the lowdown on this. I mean, if you're finding it difficult to rent property, if you've got a story, I'd love to hear from you, because there's bound to be some unscrupulous landlords. What we also know, as we said before, is that an awful lot of councils are now actively seeking landlords to give them their properties so that they can rent them to some of the migrants who are coming into the country, whether it's legal or illegal. That's one of the reasons there's so much pressure, I would say, on the current situation. Let's take a call. Malcolm's in Devon, wants to talk about Gerry Adams. Malcolm, very good morning to you.
Good morning, how's things?
Yeah, very good indeed. What can I do for you, Malcolm?
I was just sort of quite disgusted that the head Muppet is going to give or allow Gerry Adams to get some compensation for being a part of the IRA.
Yeah.
When we were soldiers over there, searching him every single time, so he used to be with all the other... I've got to really watch what I'm saying, though. He was with all the other IRA members.
Yeah.
Some of them are now dead.
Yeah.
Thank God. But I just think it's at a disgust. And now the head Muppet and this bunch of Muppet people at government have now got all the ex-Northern Ireland soldiers and forces personnel against them on top of everybody else.
Exactly right. Because there's no chance, is there, that there's a coincidence between Keir Starmer's human rights background and his wishing to do this. You know, as Sir Ian Duncan-Smith said, who served in Northern Ireland, what about the human rights of the victims? What about the human rights of the families who lost their loved ones thanks to the IRA's atrocities?
I mean, can I claim, through Keir Starmer and his Muppet government, damages for PTSD from Northern Ireland and what the IRA did? I mean...
Well, maybe you should.
I always guarantee I know what the answer is.
Yeah, I know. Well, you find a human rights lawyer, you have to find somebody who's right-wing, because they'll say, oh, well, you can't have PTSD, that's a right-wing disease. You know, if you're a terrorist, you're okay. You know, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
I'm almost sort of half embarrassed that I fought for all that I fought for after 22 years in the army to let the Muppets get in and run the show.
I know, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Well, thank you for what you did at the time, Malcolm, anyway. Cheers. Malcolm in Devon, fought in Northern Ireland, searched Gerry Adams on plenty of occasions, knows exactly what goes on there. Anybody who knows what happened in Northern Ireland knows that Gerry Adams should not be getting compensation. And as somebody else said, what about all the money he took out of Parliament when he was an MP, when he didn't actually bother to go and do any work? I think we say, right, whatever compensation you think you want, take it out of that. Thanks very much indeed. Now, coming up, we're going to play you a video just after this next break, which will blow your socks off, I think you'll find. It's yet another incidence of what's going wrong in our prison systems and what's going wrong generally in lawless Britain. Amanda in London says, recent events have clearly shown Starmer's political judgment is blinded by his monumental arrogance. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's absolutely spot on. Well said, Amanda. This is Talk.
Well, I mean, I think, if anything, I think Kemi Badenoch's the person that should be taking this the most seriously of anyone. I mean, I think if this poll shows anything other than the massive growth of reform, it just shows that people are still totally not interested in the Tories. I mean, since the election, I think lots of people thought that post-election, Labour would come in and then people say, oh no, actually, I'm going to go back to the Tories, this is worse. But it just shows that people are so put off by the last 14 years of their governing that is still not an appealing choice for people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 10 minutes till 9. We're about to enter the final hour of the show. It's looking a bit murky out there this morning, a bit misty, a bit kind of damp, dank, not very nice. It's warmed up a bit, so it's not frozen anymore, but it's not a particularly happy Wednesday in terms of the weather, but we'll keep you abreast of all of that. A couple of things to mention. We've got a voice note here from John on public service making cuts.
Mike, it's John from Suffolk. You're talking about government cuts and then asking the government departments to look at their own departments. Well, you know, that's like turkeys voting for Christmas. They ain't going to do that. Being a civil servant, fully aware that if you don't spend the budget, you lose it. So that ain't going to work. Need something like the DOGE unit that Elon Musk is going to set up. Great show, carry on.
Yeah, absolutely right, John. There's no chance that Rachel Reeves is going to make any savings in Whitehall. They're just going to go, yeah, whatever, and then we'll just wait until you get sacked, and then we won't do it. And that's that's the way government works. Joanna from Salisbury says, Mike, more money was found under the bed this morning. Jerry Adams is getting some. That will open a new floodgate to loads more Irish claims. Well, of course it will. You know, once you start telling people they can apply for compensation, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to apply for compensation. Exactly right. Now, just before we speak to James Wright, farmer and agri-tech entrepreneur, about the latest row between farmers and the government, have a look at this, right? This is a very disturbing video. It's been acquired by The Sun. They published it online, but also on page 17 of the newspaper today. Two inmates, right? These are two young men in the Feltham Young Offenders Institution in West London, basically brandishing two zombie knives, right? Now, you might ask how they've got zombie knives inside a young offenders institution. You might also ask how the smuggled phone is in the hand of one of them. It's a 9-second clip. Basically, you can hear other lags jeering on the film. One shouts, "My effing sons, you know," as they wave these zombie knives around. It's absolutely incredible. Both people in the video are believed to have been released since this was filmed. It was filmed, I think, last year, with one recently uploading footage of himself inhaling nitrous oxide. It was this video was shared on Snapchat last week, and now the authorities are busy investigating to see how it could have happened. Absolutely extraordinary. I mean, these horrible, really killer long knives. They go about sort of, you know, nearly a foot long, and you can see the blades flashing there in the lights. Broken Britain, I kid you not. Let's talk about farming, though, because only this week, supermarket giant Morrison's has backed farmers' protests against Labour's inheritance tax raid, which is more bad news for Rachel Reeves, really. Here's James Wright, who's a farmer and agri-tech entrepreneur. James, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
We've seen over the past week or so, we talked to Alan Miller quite a lot from the Together organisation, and there's been lots of demonstrations up and down the country, lots of tractors being driven around, and there's more demonstrations to come. How important is this intervention from Morrison's?
Well, it's fantastic that Morrison's have, you know, not only do they back farmers with the food that they buy, they've got great commitments around buying British, but also they've come out and backed farmers against Labour. And it's simple, the family farm tax devastates family farms, but it's bad for the nation's food security. Yeah. It's farmers who produce the food that we all eat.
Well, exactly right. And we keep hearing from Rachel Reeves that it's only a very small number of farmers that are going to be affected by it, to which a lot of farmers say, well, why is it any? You know, why would you be happy with that? Why would you be happy with harming, you know, farmers who are doing a pretty decent job of providing food for the rest of the country at a very reasonable price? And so there's still this disparity, isn't there, between the Treasury figures, the DEFRA figures and the farmers' own figures?
Yeah, well, I mean, why would you trust anything that Rachel Reeves says? So she's got her numbers wrong. The NFU, National Farmers Union, and other organisations say it's going to be thousands of farmers a year. But even if it was 500 farms, 500 of the nation's largest farms, the largest farms produce the most food.
Right.
So why are we attacking the people who produce the most food and taxing them the most? Farmers already pay lots of tax. We pay VAT, we pay national insurance, we pay corporation tax or income tax when we make a profit, the occasions that we do. But simple matter of fact is the inheritance tax is just too much. Farms land is not worth its productive capacity. The small farm that we own, it would never earn the amount in my lifetime to pay the inheritance tax.
Right.
Now, I run a company alongside working, but if I had to rely on the income from farming, it's simple. I wouldn't be able to feed my children. Can you imagine that? A farmer not being able to afford to feed their own children. But that is a story for lots of farmers up and down the country.
Yeah. Is this a case, do you think, of the sort of Westminster bubble not understanding how the rest of the country actually works? Because we do seem to have a government now made up of this kind of, you know, managerial class of, you know, university students who went on to become special advisors in government and worked in the civil service and then somehow got a job in Parliament. You know, they don't seem to know much about what happens outside of the M25.
Yeah, I mean, is it a conspiracy or is it just, you know, mismanagement? And you know, it's probably not a conspiracy, but it almost certainly is mismanagement. It's a bunch of civil servants, some of whom are brilliant, but a lot of them just don't understand what goes on beyond the M25. And Labour, I mean, Steve Reed is the MP for Croydon. He doesn't have a single, and he's the DEFRA secretary. He's the there's a single farm in his constituency, and yet he's responsible for the nation's food security. I mean, what sense does that make?
It makes no sense at all. And his previous job, by the way, was to be leader of Lambeth Council. I'm not sure whether there's a city farm or two in that particular jurisdiction, but they don't know much about combine harvesters. I don't think they've ever seen one, you know. And that is the thing that I think I find quite astonishing, because once you do get outside London, particularly when you live in it, as I do, you know, the world is a very different place. Britain is a very different place to London, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we live in rural North Devon. If I want to get to my local shop to buy some milk, it's a 20-minute trip there, and then, you know, let alone coming back to get my children to school.
Yeah,
it's a 40-minute round trip. I mean, you know, it's just geographically everything is more complicated, and simply a lot of people, a lot of civil servants, a lot of Labour MPs don't come and visit. I mean, Steve Reed has only visited one farm since he was elected, and the question is, was he wearing welly boots bought by Lord Ali, or was he wearing welly boots that he paid for himself?
I think we all know the answer to that one. What's up next on the agenda for you guys? Is there going to be some more London action and more demonstrations in London? What's going on?
Well, I think today farmers are meeting in supermarket car parks to show their solidarity with the public, to meet the public who buy our food and explain why the family farm tax is so bad. There is more action planned over the next couple of months, but the real key date is the spring statement, which we'll have at the end of March. It will be the opportunity for Labour and Rachel Reeves to reverse the family farm tax. But it's not just the family farm tax. There is funding that's given to farmers for capital works, which help us produce food and protect nature, and Labour have put those on hold. And, you know, that will devastate the long-term food productive capacity of the nation's farms. So they've got to tell us what's happening with that as well. So there is a lot happening in farming. We've got calving, we've got lambing, and then also we'll have harvest. So we really want to get this done and sorted before then, so farmers can plan for the future and carry on feeding the nation.
Absolutely. Well, we wish you the best. Thanks, James, for talking to us. James Wright, farmer and agri-tech entrepreneur, saying how much it's helping farmers to know that Morrison's, amongst others, are now on their side and will help them with their protests against this government's ridiculous inheritance tax change, which is going to affect so many farmers, because the government still insists that they've got it right and everybody else has got it wrong. Tez in Leicester says, morning, Mike, inflation down 0.1%. Fuel prices up, energy prices up, food prices still rising. Starmer will say in Prime Minister's questions that they are lowering inflation. What a farce. Have a good day. Yeah, he no doubt will, but even he can't cling on to the burning wreckage, surely, of this economy and claim that Labour are doing a good thing, because they certainly aren't. Coming up in the next hour, Mel Stride joins us. He's a Shadow Chancellor. We'll find out what he's got to say about Rachel Reeves and Tulip Siddiq. And who's next to go? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. We're in the final hour of the show. We're going to be talking to Mel Stride, who's the Shadow Chancellor, coming up in a little while. John Curtis is going to be here as well. He's, of course, the guru of elections. He's going to be talking to us not only about polling recently, but also about what is actually going to happen in May, because nobody really knows, and nobody's really explained it to me. We've been trying to find out precisely what is going to go on when the local elections are held, because some local elections are going to go ahead and others are not. And we're going to try and get to the bottom of exactly what is going on. The front pages this morning very much dominated by two stories. One all about Princess of Wales, Kate, who is now clear of cancer. No sign of it, according to the front page of The Sun. It's a relief to be in remission, she says. Front page picture on the Telegraph, Princess's cancer in remission, a very happy, smiling face of Kate staring out at you. The big story, of course, politically, is that Keir Starmer has lost yet another government minister, Tulip Siddiq. Only yesterday we were saying, surely she can't hang on for very much longer. And sure enough, there she was, gone in the afternoon. But of course, she hasn't done anything wrong. The trouble is, though, Keir Starmer had insisted that he had full confidence in her only 24 hours before. He's also got full confidence in Rachel Reeves. So that can't be good for her either, can it? 2 lame ducks, it said on the front page of the Daily Mail yesterday. Now it says 1 lame duck down. Also, the other big story that's exercising an awful lot of people this morning is on the front page of the Telegraph. The Prime Minister is to pay damages to Gerry Adams, the head of Sinn Féin, a man that was linked to the IRA throughout his entire career. He apparently will now be able to claim compensation for being locked up during the Troubles. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. We'll also be talking about learner drivers. Apparently, depending on which part of the country you live in, you will be able to pass your test really, really easily, where 9 out of 10 people pass, or you will never pass your test because only 1 out of 10 people pass in certain places. But I'm asking the question this morning, why on earth is driving in this country become so bad? Why do people not know how to do it? There's pothole carnage as well, £579 million being spent to repair your car. Also, Sven-Göran Eriksson died owing the taxman £7 million. Incredible stuff. By the way, inflation has gone down to 2.5% from 2.6%. So nothing to write home about. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Now, let's talk about Tulip Siddiq. We've already had conversations with Dan Hodges, who's actually said, and he's a Labour supporter, Dan Hodges. He's put out a column in the Mail today in which he says, government of service, what a load of old cobblers. Because, of course, Keir Starmer consistently says he's going to have a government of service. He's going to fix the foundations. He's going to have a party which will not have anything to do with cronyism. Let's have a look at what he said back in 2023 when he was leader of the opposition and Dominic Raab resigned.
Because there's a double weakness here. He should never have appointed him in the first place, along with other members of the cabinet that shouldn't have been appointed. And then he didn't sack him. And even today, it's Raab who resigns rather than the Prime Minister who acts. No matter how many times you change the person at the top, you've essentially got a party that just can't deliver, just can't govern. Well, the big question for the Prime Minister is why he was so weak to appoint him in the first place. The second question for the Prime Minister is why he didn't sack him. And now it's left to Dominic Raab to resign, and the Prime Minister hasn't acted. And it's that indecision, it's that weakness, I think, that goes to the heart, not just of this Prime Minister, but of 13 years now of failure.
Yes, weakness and inability to make a decision. I wonder who that would remind you of. Yeah, exactly right. Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer there describing his own government now that he's doing exactly what he's accusing Boris Johnson of doing. Absolutely extraordinary times. You notice as well that he's not wearing any glasses. So back in 2023, he didn't need glasses. Suddenly gets into being Prime Minister and runs an election campaign wearing glasses, which it turns out were provided for free by Lord Ali. I don't know whether they're real glasses. I don't know whether he needs them for any reason, but he didn't need them in 2023. Was he wearing contact lenses? I think we should be told. Ian says, Mike, this government reached a new low every day. I'm scared to turn the news on in the mornings. I don't understand why so many people, including Starmer, misread the Human Rights Act. The Act is very clear. National security, effect on the public, other people's rights totally trump many aspects of the individual rights. Exactly right. And why did Rachel Reeves go to China to cut deals when the economy is nosediving, says this text. So why wasn't the Trade Secretary there to do the heavy lifting and their job? Well, that's a good question. Let's have a listen to what Richard Tice asked Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, yesterday.
Well, the data shows, Chancellor, in September and October, that the economy is falling. It's going down. And the markets are expressing their clear concerns, the currency markets, the bond markets, in selling off, that actually there is no growth and that the economy continues to fall. If the Chancellor is so confident, can she confirm to the House when the economy will start growing again?
Chancellor. I thank the honourable gentleman for that question. Growth is the #1 mission of this Labour government. But the truth is, it's not possible to turn things around quickly after 14 years of lacklustre growth and declining living standards from the party opposite. But we're leaving no stone unturned, which is why last week in China we secured £600 million worth of tangible benefits for the UK economy, helping great British businesses exporting overseas.
Yes, I mean, she talks a good game, doesn't she, Rachel Reeves? But it's not very clear how the economy is ever going to have any growth in it. And it's not very clear either when people are going to start feeling better off. She talks about stability. We talk about the government of service, providing the people with more money in their pocket. None of that is happening at the moment, I'm afraid. Dario in Dartford will kick us off for the next section, because we're going to talk to Marcus Solars-Hendricks in a moment, Head of National Security Unit at the Policy Exchange. He says this: Mike, let's not forget the Chagosian people are still British citizens. Not only are we about to pay a foreign country to take them off our hands, but in just 15 years' time, when America's 100-year lease runs out, those islands will be worth a substantial asset due to a military-based rental income of millions of pounds a year. Well, that's a very good point. A story in the papers today saying that the deal to hand the Chagos Islands over to Mauritius is set to be effectively signed off today by Mauritius. Some suggestion that Labour are trying to get it done, trying to get the deal sorted and over the line before Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday. But the FT, on the other hand, are saying, actually, there's some suggestion of cold feet inside Downing Street. Let's find out what Marcus knows. Marcus, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. Yeah, I mean, there seems to be two schools of thought here. One is that the Labour were trying to rush this through initially before the elections in Mauritius. Then the elections came and went. The new government weren't supposed to be that keen, but now are, presumably having been promised £9 billion over a period of time. But now we're hearing as well that there's a bit of fear in Downing Street that if they do the deal and rush it through, Trump will just kind of reverse it when he gets in anyway.
Well, look, you're right. And I think what we can say safely is that this has been one hot mess since it very started.
Yes.
I think that the government is clearly torn at the moment between obstinacy and wanting to see through its deal. You have the new National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, who negotiated the agreement, the proposed agreement with Mauritius, clearly seeing this now as quite a personal thing, wanting to rush it through. On the other, you obviously see the complete ridiculousness of trying to do that before the next American administration comes in. I was on here on your programme just the other week talking about our recent policy exchange report, which called for the government to actually pull out of the agreement, saying that everything that's happened since, whether it be the Chagosian people blowback against the deal, the new American administration, with many of which are senior officials opposing the deal in the past, and not least the Mauritian government itself seeking to reopen the negotiations. All of these reasons clearly show that the government should withdraw, this is the British one, with grace and with purely legitimately as well, because of the changed circumstances. So it seems that perhaps they have indeed read our paper.
Yeah, well, that's good news, isn't it? It means that you have more influence than you thought. But at the end of the day, isn't it interesting that this has always been something that kind of came out of the blue, wasn't it? You know, just because one particular ruling in one particular court suggested it should happen, you know, there was a sort of indecent haste, it seemed, from the Foreign Office and also from Downing Street to get on with it, when nobody was really calling for it.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this all sparked because of an International Court of Justice non-binding opinion that it gave in 2019.
Yeah.
You know, this is totally, there's absolutely no requirement here for the government to follow in this. In our paper, we show there's many examples in history where governments have chosen not to take non-binding opinions and haven't faced devastating diplomatic and legal consequences. I think what's critical to remember here is that, of course, the Conservatives did start negotiations with Mauritius back in 2022. However, the Conservatives went through 10 rounds of negotiations. They didn't sign anything. They had their red lines. They saw this as an issue of dynamic strategic risk that had to be managed. But Labour has come in, rushed to sign a deal because it seems to see this sort of legal compliance issue as being paramount to the long-term security of the base. Of course, the complete irony of all of this is that transferring sovereignty of the islands on which the military base resides is the surest way of destabilising its long-term security. And the last several months absolutely display the long-term insecurity that such a deal would cast the base into. So it's great that the government seems to have got cold feet, and let's hope they continue to do so.
Well, right. And how have they arrived at the money as well? I mean, in terms of the amount of money they're promising, how have they calculated that exactly?
I mean, it seems like they've put their finger in, they've wet their finger and put it in the breeze. I mean, who knows? So what a striking thing is that reports had previously said that it might be that the government would never disclose the full financial agreement with Mauritius for reasons of national security. which is, of course, quite ironic because it is our national security which is at stake if we do transfer sovereignty over the base to another country. The government has made every mistake you could possibly do in negotiations. It's gone in, it is essentially confessed that it doesn't think that the UK ever has a legal and moral ownership of the islands by admitting that it's going to renegotiate and seize sovereignty. So then that just allowed Mauritius to come in and make any demands it wants. Again, reports that they wanted as much as 800 million a year. I mean, it was the government was playing catch up from the beginning, and it's just been a litany of errors by this point, apart from hopefully the latest news that they might roll back on it.
Yeah, well, let's hope that they continue to see sense and not do it. And it would fill in yet another tick box in our return of the year of common sense. But good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Marcus Solars Hendricks, the head of National Security Unit at the Policy Exchange. They wrote a paper on this. He hopes and is pretty sure that the government read it and have suddenly decided, no, actually, this is not such a great idea after all, because it isn't. Absolutely isn't. Sarah's in Somerset wants to say something about it. Sarah, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thank you. What would you like to say?
I was listening to you and I was thinking, I can't believe what I'm hearing. How are they even legally allowed to give away £10 billion, which is not even their money, in order to do this? He's not listening to us. He doesn't give a damn about. He's completely anti-Western, anti-British.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be there. He shouldn't be there as our leader. Lamy and all of them, they are completely bought and paid by the likes of Davos.
Yeah.
And he even said as much. He even said that he'd, if he was asked, wasn't he?
He'd rather stay in Davos, wouldn't he?
Sorry, say that again, Mike.
So he said he'd rather be in Davos than Westminster, didn't he?
Right. Well, I'd love to see him just go there and leave us alone.
All year round. Because you're going to go there at the end of this month because they're going to be back for the Davos jamboree. So no doubt he'll be taking a couple of private jets out there with a few people, hanging about, telling us all how we should be living. It's unbelievable, isn't it, Sarah? Thank you very much indeed. One from Joe in Norfolk. Great show, Mike. We all know that when No Idea Keir says one thing, he really means the opposite. So when he says Rachel from Accounts is staying, we all know she's currently packing her bags. I think that's probably true. When are we getting reparations from China, putting the entire planet under house arrest for 3 years, says Nick in Woking. It's a very good point. Let's get a voice note from Dave on Jerry Adams.
Hi, Mike. This is Dave in Stoke. If they're going to pay compensation to Jerry Adams, who's next? Shamima Begum?
Yeah, I mean, you say that, but I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. Not only do they want to pay her compensation, they want to bring her back, give her a new identity, set her up in a house somewhere in Suffolk with a nice view of the sea, and she can wander about freely, not worrying about a thing. Jess in Dover says, I read somewhere last night that some Labour MPs are now calling Rachel from Accounts Rachel the Temp. Yes, if only it were true. Well, Prime Minister's questions coming up a bit later on. We'll find out from Julie Hartley-Brewer what's likely to come up on that. She's here just before 10 o'clock. Coming up next, though, we're going to try and get to the bottom of these gerrymandering, changes that are being made to our local councils and local council elections in May. Because I don't know what on earth is going on. John Curtis, I'm hoping, will be able to tell us. This is Talk.
thing just beggars belief. It really does. It's a tragic laughing stock.
It is,
and it's why the next general election can't come soon enough, because I think the British people are going to say we're done with all of this. We need to save the country, and that's why I think we've got every prospect that Nigel will be the Prime Minister after the next general election.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense. We are entering, I think, the year of common sense. That's what I'm saying, because there are certain things that are happening which would suggest that we are returning a little bit to normal. I know we've got a long way to go, but how about this? Labour U-turns to revive free speech law. This is something that's happening in the world of academia, so it won't affect everybody. But Bridget Phillips, from the Education Secretary, is poised to bring back the Higher Education Act, which is the thing that she was saying that she was going to completely disavow. This is the thing that basically protects academics from being able to say whatever it is that they want, because the Tories tried to introduce it, didn't get through in time. Labour said they were going to kill it, which would have put a kind of a rather chilling, shall we say, straitjacket on what some people would have been allowed to say in academic scenarios. So that's good news. Let's now talk about what's happening in May, because a lot of people are looking at polls these days saying that, look, Reform and Labour looking pretty neck and neck in certain instances. Tories down in third place, the Lib Dems in fourth, the Greens not really anywhere. But there's a lot of talk about what happens at the May local elections and whether that could have some impact on the way that Keir Starmer is perceived, the way that the Labour government is perceived. Sir John Curtis, I should say, is here with us, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, and a man you must always consult when you need to know what is actually going on in the world of psephology. Sir John, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
Now, I've been asking this question for quite some time, and I'm hoping you can answer it. What is actually happening in May? Because nobody seems to be able to tell me. I know that Sussex, I think, is not going to have elections because they're busy sort of putting West Sussex and East Sussex together and making a conglomeration of some kind of region. But it's not very clear what's going on, really.
Well, the short answer to your question is, do we know what's going to happen at the beginning of May in terms of how many elections are going to be held? The answer is we don't. Originally, there were just over 30 councils that were due to have local elections. These are primarily county councils like Oxfordshire or indeed East and West Sussex, or places that used to be county councils that are now single-tier county councils, somewhere like Cornwall.
Yeah.
But just before Christmas, the UK government came out with its white paper on devolution. Now, what do you think does that to do with local government changes? Well, the answer is, in that white paper, the government very clearly says that it thinks that devolution is only going to work if we have single-tier councils throughout England. Now, we've been when we had the last major government reorganisation back in the 1970s, we created two tiers of local government everywhere. That is gradually being eroded by both Labour and Conservative governments. But we've still got areas with two tiers, and Oxfordshire is one such example. But the government's very clear, no, we should have single tiers only, local authorities of around 500,000 or so people each, and each of them ideally, though not necessarily headed by a mayor who might represent more than one local authority. So one of the things you have to grasp your mind around is that a white paper that's about devolution, and therefore you might think it's about getting power away from Westminster down to a lower level, is actually predicated on increasing the size of local government councils, at least in parts of England.
It's
okay,
kind
now,
of, it's kind of centralising bits of it, isn't it?
Well, there's an element to it. And then, of course, what is that? And the government says we think local government will be more efficient. It will help to deliver the growth thereafter. Now, what then has come on top of that is that it then also said separately, just before Christmas, well, actually, quite a lot of the places we're talking about are places where the county council is just about to have an election.
Right.
So they can apply to us to postpone their election if, as a result, we can get this new structure in place more quickly as a result.
Right.
And so far, basically, nearly all of the county councils that are still county councils with district councils underneath them have applied, but it's an application to delay their elections. Now, how many of these are going to be accepted, we don't know. We may not know until the end of March, but the government clearly is minded to go with this if they think that these local authorities can come up with proposals for single-tier authorities and a mayoral structure within the matter of the next few weeks, and that therefore you can delay the elections because you will be electing people to an authority that would be disappearing in 12 months.
So it may well be then that there won't be any local elections if all of these applications to postpone
That's not the case. That's not the case because some of the local authorities have not applied, partly because they've already have other devolution deals in place, and we've also got other authorities like Buckinghamshire, like Cornwall, that are already single tier, and where the elections are definitely still going to go ahead. So it's horribly complicated, Mike.
I thought so.
But sure, the key point is that perhaps a significant number of elections, which are essentially taking place in Shire England, or would take place in Shire England. It's more Tory territory than Labour territory, but a lot of these elections may not take place. I'm sure both Reform and Liberal Democrats are none too happy because both of them anticipated they might be able to pick up seats off a Conservative Party that is still not very popular and which will be defending a rather good set of results when these councils were last elected back in May 2021.
Yeah, exactly right. Kind of ironic, isn't it, that two-tier Keir wants to do away with two-tier local government and make it single-tier, but of course he would deny that because of course he says he's not two-tier. And what do you make, aside from all of this wrangling and all of this uncertainty, of the polls that we've been seeing over the last few days and weeks? Because I was talking to one of our regular contributors, I think Dan Hodges, this morning, who said that, you know, the Reform polling seems to be now fairly baked in. You know, it's not the odd poll where they're coming up second to Labour or neck and neck with Labour, but it's in pretty much all polls now.
Well, it's certainly true that the rise of Reform is continuing. I mean, there are now, I think, 5-6 polls that have been conducted since Christmas. On average, Reform running at 24%. That is up 3 points on the polls in December, and those in turn were as much as 6 points up on what Reform achieved back in the July general election. So the rise of Reform is still continuing. It's a certain section of our society. So again, the YouGov poll that came out yesterday, that shows 50% of those people who voted for Brexit now saying that they won't vote for Reform. So that's very much the section of our society that is backing Reform. It does mean that at the moment it's still the Conservatives who are losing more votes to Reform, and this is the reason why the Conservatives are, if anything, down on the 24% they were at in the general election. But we are now also seeing signs of Labour losing some support to Reform, though the truth is Labour's problem is they're losing votes to everybody. They're losing votes to Tories, they're losing votes to the Democrats, losing votes to the Greens, as well as to Reform. But certainly, you certainly have to go back to the 1970s to find a government whose popularity with the electorate has fallen as quickly as this so early in its office. And in net terms, at least, it is Reform who at the moment are the principal beneficiaries.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems as though in Scotland, the SNP might perversely be a beneficiary as well, because I was talking to somebody up there yesterday who said that, while Anna Sarwar was looking good to be the next First Minister when the elections are next year in the Scottish Parliament, he's looking a bit less likely now because of people's dispirited nature from the Labour government in Westminster.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the worst thing, always the biggest risk to Anas Sarwar's chances of becoming Scotland's First Minister in the May of next year was the fact that Sir Keir Starmer had won the election. It's always much more difficult for parties that are in office to do well in elections in mid-term. But certainly, I mean, Labour north of the border now are running at little more than 20%. Compared with the 35% they got in July. And that takes them pretty much back to where they were in the Holyrood election of 2021. So they may find themselves in not much of a strong position. Now, that said, it's not clear that the SNP are still not at the kind of levels of support that they were under Alex Salmond or Nicola Sturgeon. Right. Again, Reform are part of the story. The polling is suggesting that Reform could pick up around 12% of the vote north of the border, maybe a bit more. That would be enough for them to get representation at Holyrood, making it potentially difficult for both the SNP, let alone anybody else, to be able to form a government backed by a majority.
Absolutely. Fascinating as ever. Sir John Curtis, thank you very much indeed. Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. I know a little bit more now than I did about what's happening in May, but how ridiculous is it that we won't probably know for sure exactly which local elections are going ahead until the end of March? I mean, I know that there will be people who want to decide whether they want to run for office, whether they want to run as a councillor. We had yesterday Charlie Mullins on this show talking about how he wants to run for Reform. Reform apparently didn't know too much about it, but it's gone absolutely bizarre and mad on social media. People attacking him, having to go at him, saying nobody should vote for him. Reform supposedly disowning him. You know, it's all good stuff. It's all happening here at the home of common sense. This is the only show you need to watch to know what's going on in the world, right? Because we bring it to you first. Let's talk to Ian, who's in London, wants to talk about a couple of things. Ian, very good morning to you.
Right, finally we get to speak, not type to each other.
Indeed. How are you doing?
Not bad, not bad.
Good man. What do you want to say?
What I want to say is, are we not surprised with this business with Jerry Adams when David Lammy, if you hate it in the UK or you hate democracy, he'll go along like he goes to Palestine and he gives money to UNRWA because he knows they go around raping and murdering. Oh, yeah, I'll give you some money. Or they'll go to China and do deals there. I don't know what planet this mob live from. Ed Miliband, let's ruin the country with all this eco rubbish. And the other stuff, not being funny, going back to something you said yesterday, with AI and all that. It is so crooked, a lot of AI. It is unbelievable.
Yeah. And also, the more people rely upon it, the less true it becomes. You know, people seek its guidance without realising that all it is a collection of things which may or may not be true.
Well, it's like going on. I've been saying this for a couple of years now with certain online businesses where you'd use them and they tell you that you've got to do something, and as soon as you do it, they bump up what else you've got to pay promotional fees.
Exactly right. Yeah, no, it's an absolute nightmare. Ian, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. I mean, many people feel the way you do about this government. Betrayed. You know, betrayed over Jerry Adams, betrayed over winter fuel allowance, betrayed over private school VAT, betrayed over NHS waiting lists, betrayed over one thing after another, inheritance tax as well, betrayed over the Middle East, betrayed over the United States of America. What's going on? Let's talk to Mel Stride, who's the Shadow Chancellor, of course, who was in the chamber yesterday when Rachel Reeves gave what you might call a spirited performance, Mel. I don't know what you made of it, but it seemed to me that she was trying very hard to look as if she was very, very sure that she was doing everything right. Very good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Well, what I had the opportunity to do, mate, was to lay out her record in no uncertain terms on the floor of the House, and this is a government, you know, that has seen growth killed stone dead. There's been a slightly better news on inflation today, but nonetheless, the OBR saying that inflation will be higher in every year of the next 5 years than was the case, or would have been the case, under us. She's taxed businesses to almost to destruction. She's talked down the economy, and it's no surprise, therefore, and this was the point I was making to her yesterday, that we've seen these huge increases in bond yields. Now, some of that, of course, is due to global circumstances, but a lot of it isn't. We are an outlier, and we are suffering higher interest rates in this country on our borrowing, higher servicing costs on our national debt as a consequence of this crisis made in Downing Street.
Well, exactly right. And no matter how much money she says that she's going to save from Whitehall, and I'm not sure that's going to be very much at the end of the day, they're still arguing about giving £9 billion to Chagos Islands, to Mauritius rather, having given away the Chagos Islands. We're not sure if that deal is going to go through or not. You know, they seem to find money when they want to, and yet none of it seems to be helping the economy. So despite all of the kind of slashing and burning that they're doing and the tax collecting, we're all worse off somehow.
Yeah, absolutely, because they got fundamentally the wrong policy. The first thing is they do not have a pro-growth policy. What they're doing is putting taxes up on the very parts of the economy that are there to grow growth, and that's business, and that's why you're seeing all these confidence surveys, business confidence surveys falling through the floor. They should be concentrating far more, not just on spraying money around, but actually getting productivity up. That's the key to getting more out of public services and getting the economy going. And they've got to tackle welfare, Mike. Now, when I was Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, I reformed welfare to the extent that the OBR says there's a £5 billion worth of savings that I've introduced. Now, there's much more to be done in that area, but we hear nothing from this government about getting to grips with the spiralling welfare budget. We need people off benefits and into work.
Yeah. And what about getting people out of work and back on the back benches? I mean, Tulip Siddiq's the latest one. It seems to have fallen foul of Keir Starmer's wish to do away with cronyism. I mean, some of the things he said before he was elected Prime Minister are quite laughable now when you look back, when he talks about, you know, ending all sorts of, you know, friendship deals, you know, cosy deals. You know, he's lost 2 cabinet ministers and he's had to get rid of Sue Gray. 3 women. Rosie Duffield says Keir Starmer's got a problem with women. Yeah, he doesn't seem to be able to keep them in their jobs.
Well, with Tulip, I mean, the real story here, actually, is how she lasted so long. And as you say, I think the Prime Minister should have stepped in and sorted out. You can't have a minister, Mike, who, fundamental to their role, is anti-corruption and having all these issues swirling about her. When Rachel Reeves went to China, Tulip Siddiq was not with her, and one of the reasons why she wasn't with her was because of all these issues. So she's not been able to do her job. It's right that she's gone, but it's not right that the Prime Minister failed to act as quickly as he should have done.
Well, indeed. I mean, we were playing a clip earlier on today from 2023 when he was having a go at Boris Johnson about Dominic Raab's resignation and how, you know, the Prime Minister should have sacked him. He shouldn't have waited for him to resign. It's indecisive. It's weak. It shows that he's not a proper leader. I mean, apart from the name Dominic Raab, if you'd replaced it with Tulip Siddiq, he's basically described himself.
Right. Okay. Well, I haven't seen that clip that you just
maybe we should play it.
Played.
Let's play it. Let's play it for you.
Okay, let's do it.
Have a look.
Okay.
Because there's a double weakness here. He should never have appointed him in the first place, along with other members of the cabinet that shouldn't have been appointed. And then he didn't sack him. And even today, it's Raab who resigns rather than the Prime Minister who acts. No matter how many times you change the person at the top, you've essentially got a party that just can't deliver, just can't govern. Well, the big question for the Prime Minister is why he was so weak to appoint him in the first place. The second question for the Prime Minister is why he didn't sack him. And now it's left to Dominic Raab to resign, and the Prime Minister hasn't acted. And it's that indecision, it's that weakness, I think, that goes to the heart, not just of this Prime Minister, but of 13 years now of failure.
Yeah, so the third question for the Prime Minister is when did you decide you needed some free glasses from Lord Ali? You didn't wear them then.
Are you about to play another clip?
No, that's it.
No,
but, I mean, everything he says there, everything he says there is entirely what he's just done.
Yes. Well, you could have interchanged, as you say, Dominic Raab for Tulip Siddiq, and it would have been a fair charge. So, yeah, I stick with my point, Mike. You know, he should have acted much earlier. Look, you know, given the extent of the problems and challenges that we are facing and the way this government has gone about grinding the economy to a halt, you would think the most important thing you could have is a fully functioning Treasury front bench.
Yeah.
And that clearly has not been the priority that should have been on the part of the Prime Minister. And that's why he should have moved Tulip Siddiq on earlier. We have a Chancellor out there that's taking really a lot of the wrong decisions. And I think they really need to start thinking about turning this thing around, getting a grip on it. Or I'm afraid we're going to just carry on ploughing into ever more economic problems. And it'll have real effects for people right up and down the country, including the people listening to your programme.
Absolutely right. And an awful lot of it hasn't even happened yet. So when it does happen in April,
well, you're right.
Be even
April.
Worse.
Yeah. Yeah, well, people talk about the national insurance hikes and the impact of that. Well, you're absolutely right. They haven't actually bitten yet. They will in early April when they come into force. And amongst the effects that they'll have, Mike, is, of course, they will mean that business profitability will go down. That will mean business investment will go down. It will also mean them hiring less people, so unemployment will go in an upward direction. But it will also be, to some degree, inflationary, because some of these businesses will have to pass those additional costs on by way of higher prices. And that, in turn, will mean that interest rates will stay higher for longer. So people who've got mortgages will be paying more on their mortgages. So this is all a vicious circle. And the fundamental decisions on tax that this government took when it came into office have, I'm afraid, proven ruinous.
Yeah, they really have. Let me ask you about Gerry Adams. It's on the front page of the Telegraph this morning as well. But let's just listen to a voice note we've got from one of our viewers, Andy, who wants to say this.
Good morning, Mike. Andy in Portsmouth. I myself never served in the forces, but my good friend and next-door neighbour did, and he was in the Royal Marines, and he played for the band. And in 1989, when the IRA detonated a bomb and killed 11 of his friends and colleagues and injured 20-odd others, he's now left on the shelf, PTSD, alcoholism, and he's basically got nothing. And Starmer wants to start giving money to Gerry Adams. I tell you what, Mike, it makes my bloody blood boil. It really does.
It's hard to believe, isn't it, Mel? I mean, some of these things that we argue about in politics, you can have a view, you can take, opposing views and have a row and have a laugh and pat yourselves on the back at the end of it. But this seems to me to be a different area. I mean, the idea that Gerry Adams, a man who, as it was pointed out to me earlier on, didn't bother to turn up for his job in Parliament because he refused to pledge allegiance to the Crown, took the money, took expenses, is now possibly in line for compensation for being locked up during the Troubles in Ireland. I mean, I've had a very, very strong response to this morning. I mean, it seems incredible that he can get away with it.
I mean, look, that recorded message that we've just heard really heads up the fact that these are really deep and serious issues, as I think you're saying. It is not right that the government should be seeking to amend and change legislation to allow Gerry Adams and others, or those that are involved in the IRA and so on, to seek compensation around their internment in the 1970s. Now, that is legislation that will need to go through Parliament, and that is legislation that, in those terms, we will be resisting very firmly indeed.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, because I think an awful lot of the victims' families as well, and there are many of those, are saying this is untenable. We didn't get any compensation. The victims didn't get any compensation. Absolutely extraordinary. In terms of just one final thing, I was just talking to John Curtis there about the May elections and the current polls, which are still showing the Conservatives trailing now behind Reform on quite a number of different polls. The Conservatives keep saying that they are the party of opposition, but it's beginning to look like Reform might be the party of opposition, certainly in local government, very possibly in the next couple of years.
Well, look, we'll have to see where that goes. What we have to concentrate on now as a party is firstly holding this government to account effectively. Now, the British people expect us to do that. That's why I'm on your programme talking about the economy, holding the government to account. And that's part of the way of regaining trust. Because, Mike, I think we have to be absolutely honest. We as a party lost the trust of the electorate at the last general election. But the second thing we've got to do is not to lose sight of the fact that the general election now is going to be about 4.5 years away. So we have the time now to do that deep, thoughtful thinking around putting together the kind of policy platform, including and particularly actually on the economy, such that we can meet the aspirations of the British people, get into that position of trust, and then take over from this rotten Labour government that I'm afraid is going completely in the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely right. Mel, thank you very much indeed. Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor, there talking from Westminster. Coming up, Prime Minister's Questions, of course, at midday today. That'll be live right here on Julie Hartley-Brewer's show. You'll hear all the good bits and all the bad bits, very possibly, as well. Peter says, Johnson prorogued Parliament and was caned for it, yet Starmer wants to halt local elections. It's disgraceful. Well, it certainly is. This is, of course, Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. We'll have more coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:46. I'm Mike Graham, here until 10 o'clock. Barrow Boy says this: I think I've woken up in a parallel universe this morning. I've been told by an ex-Labour financial advisor that Rachel's budget will benefit me in April and that my hard-earned cut money will end up in the pocket of Jerry Adams and co as compensation for wrongdoings. What the hell is going on? Very good question. Let's talk to Mike, who's in Devon. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Mike.
Good morning, sir. What can I do for you?
I'd just like to say Starmer seems to have a bottomless pit of billions of pounds to spend on the Chagos Islands, net zero, anything he wants to, foreign aid, but nothing to spend on the citizens of this country, leaving us lawless, defenceless and hopeless.
Yeah, indeed. And he's quite happy to find some money for Jerry Adams, by the looks of it, as well.
He can find money for whatever he wants except us. It's all cuts, cuts, cuts.
Yeah. It is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, I don't know which way you voted, you don't have to tell me, but is there any sort of wonder with the people you talk to, because I know there is with the people I talk to, that this government could be as bad as it is?
No, Mike, I've got some friends who are dedicated socialists and are absolutely disgusted with what's happening.
Are they?
You know, voted for him and wish they never had.
Yeah, right. He's not pleasing he's not doing anything that pleases anyone.
Nobody in this country at all.
No. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Quite extraordinary. Mike, thank you very much indeed. This from Jane, who says, morning, Mike. To see Rachel Reeves and co laughing yesterday was disgusting. It is no laughing matter that people who have lost virtually everything thanks to her. I think that's true. It's a very good point. And how about this from Daz in Yorkshire? He says, when I woke up and saw that Siddiq had resigned, I was hoping it was the Mayor of London. I'd be happy if it was. and I'm from Yorkshire. Yeah, well, a lot of people would be happier if it was, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. We're not going to get his resignation for a while yet, but we'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep working away. You never know. It's 9:48. This is Talk.
Changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. What a beautiful name. The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, Canada and the United States, that would really be something. All hell will break out in the Middle East, and it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer here in about 6 or 7 minutes to tell us what's coming up on her show. Let's have a voice note from Hannah.
Mike, just listening to the show today, and I just want to say something about Keir Starmer talking about harnessing AI. It's a load of fig, because my husband works in AI and is at the forefront of AI technology for a global company, and they cannot get people and the expertise to come to the UK to build anything. They're not opening offices here. The talent won't come here. It's an adverse place to do business, they say. And on top of that, people won't come here because, guess what? The schools, you have to pay VAT. So it's all becoming too expensive, too ridiculous, and it's just got to stop. Reeves has to resign. I cannot even believe she's still in a job.
Incredible. Hannah, what an interesting piece of information that is. Yeah, because when you talk to people who are actually in proper business, you get a proper view of how Britain is viewed, how the economy is viewed, how our stability is viewed. It's all very well for Rachel Reeves to talk about, putting more money into the pockets of working people, and it's all very well for Keir Starmer to talk about government of service. But the international community is looking on and going, Nah, I don't think so. Taxes are too high, schools are too expensive, taxes on schools are too high, and frankly, I can't find the right sort of house, I can't drive the right sort of car. I think I'll just stay where I am, thanks very much indeed. Incredible. Absolutely ridiculous. Lorraine says this, how is it, the big question here now is, why did Starmer appoint Tulip Siddiq in the first place? The second, why Starmer failed to sack her? Too weak, Starmer. Well, the problem is, of course, Starmer is a good friend of Tulip Siddiq. She's one of his sort of political heavyweight mates, and he didn't want to sack her. That's right. So he had to have her resign instead, and he's had to say to her, the door is always open if you wish to return. Well, it won't be always open if she gets done over by the authorities in Bangladesh. Linda from South Staffordshire says, Mike, Ray, potholes, I have it on good authority that most councils have designated them as upside-down speed bumps. How brilliant is that? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, earlier on, we spoke to Kinsey Schofield, our royal correspondent over in Hollywood in Los Angeles, California. Here's what she had to say about the Princess of Wales.
She visited yesterday the Royal Marsden Hospital in West London, and it was so sweet to watch her walk around and personally thank staff, some staff that actually cared for her, and she thanked them for their care and compassion. One patient that was there, she said, I'm sorry, I wish there was more that I could do to help you, which, that breaks your heart when you hear that. She also told another one, you are in the best of hands, which I imagine as a patient does give you some confidence when you look at how happy and healthy she looks today compared to where we now know she was a year ago. It was a mystery at the time, but we now know what she was going through a year ago.
Yeah, and I mean, you forget really how young she is to be suffering from such a terrible thing, and you would hope that that being in remission obviously is a fantastic thing. The chemotherapy obviously worked, but it'll change their lives forever, really, won't it?
I think so. I mean, a lot of us grew up watching Prince William, navigate life without his mother. And I think that was one of the reasons we were so heavily invested and worried about Catherine's health over the last year, because we never wanted anything similar to hurt him in that way. And we didn't want him to have to be worried about his children not having their mother. So this is incredible news. I thought that the family handled it with such grace over the last year. And you're right. It's not just the fact that she's young. It's the fact that she's got 3 adorable children that you can tell are absolutely in love with her.
And absolutely great news. Front page of The Sun this morning as well. It's a relief to be in remission, says Kate, Princess of Wales. And we'll be seeing a lot more of her this year because she's able to do an awful lot more work than she has been doing up until now. Now, earlier in the show, we introduced you to Professor Ashwin Kumar, who's a former economic advisor to Gordon Brown. He was telling us all about how great the budget was going to be for us. Not now, not tomorrow, but it's in April, apparently. Got this from Paul. He says, how can inflation be going down? All my bills have gone up at least 3 times more than the inflation figure. Is the calculator broken, or is this Reeves economics? Stephen says, Mike, Professor Ashwin Kumar is talking rubbish. Food, drink, energy, fuel are all up by far more than 2%. Interest rates are rising. Taxes are up. He's just a spin doctor for Labour. Well, let's have a look at how Labour are doing. This came across our desk just the other day. Check it out.
Top story this morning, the UK economy has unexpectedly shrunk for a second month in a row, dealing a
votes. Those are government figures updated for us on Boxing Day.
And without warning to locals, 300 male asylum seekers have started to move in.
Keir Starmer, we understand, knew about this conviction.
Some time ago now, she was mugged, and as a part of that procedure, she went to the police and apparently said that her phone was also stolen. It then transpired that may not have been the case.
Incidentally, over the past 5 years, Sir Keir was top of the league of MPs receiving gifts and hospitality.
I think most people watching this would say, well, fair dues.
Since 2019, Starmer has received gifts worth a total of £107,145, the biggest amount of any MP.
Tulip Siddiq and some members of her family have come under suspicion. A standards inquiry is underway in Westminster.
She is the anti-corruption minister. She has serious charges laid against her now, or serious accusations that around corruption.
Political impact there of Labour MPs voting against a national inquiry into child grieving scandal.
Some people who were jailed for sex offences
will be released from prison early.
I think you were. But, you know, I've seen prisoners released and get picked up in Rolls Royces. And, you know, you do look and think, well, who says crime doesn't pay?
Must be the most unpopular Prime Minister ever.
What do you think?
I think they're rubbish.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the summation of us all, and so say all of us. I think they're rubbish. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. What do you think of it so far?
All pretty rubbish. You know what I found extraordinary this morning? Darren Jones, the deputy to Rachel Reeves. I mean, it's not doing well in the Treasury right now. He was literally on telly this morning saying people are going to feel better off now because inflation was down to 2.5%. We don't have more money in our pocket.
No.
Inflation is just going up.
Right.
Prices are going up at a lower rate. If you work in the Treasury and you don't know that when prices go up, we're not better off.
Yes.
I'm really quite worried